Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Cher Lynn Hughes. Cher Hughes is a businesswoman in her 50s. Her husband, Keith Worrell, is 3 years younger than her. They are both from Florida and quickly fell in love with the tropical Bocas del Toro. They decided to move to Panama to start a new life. After living there for 6 months, they purchased a plot of land and built a small hotel called Casa del Sapa, which they both directly managed. Thanks to Cher and Keith's business acumen, they developed the hotel into a success. But they didn't stop there. Using her savings, Cher gradually acquired 4 additional properties to expand her business. One day, she excitedly told Keith that she had purchased an entire island. She loved the area so much that she couldn't help herself. She wanted to keep buying more properties and make it her permanent home. Together, they created their dream haven. Cher and Keith appeared deeply connected and were often referred to as Ken and Barbie for their harmonious relationship. It seemed they had a bright and happy future ahead of them. Sadly, Cher's fate was tragic. Although she was unable to have children, she always longed to be a mother. For years, she underwent treatments and tried tirelessly to conceive, but her efforts were unsuccessful. However, she fulfilled her dream of becoming a mother by caring for and helping the local children on the island. She regularly bought them uniforms, school supplies, organized themed parties, boat trips, and fun events. The children loved her very much and called her Mrs. Cher. After a period of living on the island, Keith and Cher divorced. Keith began a new relationship with another woman, also an immigrant from the United States. Despite being betrayed, Cher still did not let herself fall. Determined to move forward, she mends her relationship with her sister Judy, whom she had not talked to much recently. To mark this fresh start, Cher planned a small gathering, inviting Judy and a few close friends. The intimate event was meant to help her heal, forget her husband, and found solace after their divorce. Cher had bought her sister Judy's ticket a month ago and was eager to see her again. Judy happily accepted her invitation and looked forward to the reunion. Judy missed her younger sister very much and was eager to mend their relationship. However, as Judy prepared for the trip, she abruptly stopped communicating. Over the next several days, she did not reply to messages or answer calls. Oddly, new posts appeared on her social network, but they were just recycled content from the past. This behavior seemed strange and somewhat alarming. Judy tried to find out why Cher ignored her, but all her questions went unanswered. Cher not only ignored Judy, but also all of her family and friends, who had also made repeated attempts to contact her. Growing increasingly concerned, Judy contacted Keith. However, he was cold and indifferent. He said that he was divorced from Cher. He claimed he had no idea where she was and made it clear that he had no plans to reconcile with or search for her. Cher's family thought this was unusual. They began checking her social media pages and contacting her acquaintances. Judy sent messages to nearly everyone Cher knew, explaining her disappearance, but no one had any significant information. About 10 days later, they received a message from Cher's account. In the message, Cher said she was relaxing with a man, but did not reveal his name. She also mentioned that the two were planning to go on a cruise. However, this explanation seemed confusing and out of character for Cher. Judy's worries grew stronger. Is there something fishy behind her seemingly normal divorce from Keith? His behavior had been strange, rude, and disrespectful, making Judy suspect he's hiding something. Cher's silence only makes Judy more worried. She started to fear that her sister might be in danger or even the victim of a crime. Determined to find answers, Judy contacted a friend of Cher's, Payne Thor, for help in the search. However, he wasn't able to find any useful leads. After 2 weeks of searching, he finally reported Cher's disappearance to the police. The case quickly attracted attention, thanks to Judy's frequent activity on social media. Moreover, During the 6 months she lived on the islands building her business, Cher became famous. She played an important role in the community, supporting children and people in difficulty. Hundreds of people were willing to help her family and find out the truth about her disappearance. However, the law enforcement system on the islands is very rudimentary. Despite their good intentions, the police department lacks both the resources and the capacity to investigate the case effectively. They questioned her acquaintances, but assumed that she was simply spending time with friends or that she had met a new man. When they learned that Cher was allegedly planning to go on a yacht, they accepted this theory and decided to close the case. Cher's family, who lived more than 2,000 kilometers away, were shocked and desperate. They contacted the U.S. Embassy in Panama to pressure the local police to speed up the investigation. The police received documents related to the case. Unsurprisingly, the first suspect was Cher's ex-husband Keith, who was summoned for questioning. He is ready to provide any information to exonerate himself as soon as possible. As the media covered the case, rumors began to circulate. Some accused Keith of being a cruel tyrant who mistreated Cher and was unfaithful to her. Many even suspected him of being involved in her disappearance. They had first met in Florida in 1993, when she visited Keith's bar. From the first moment, he was attracted to her, and so was she. After starting her own business, Cher set a goal to earn $1 million before moving on to new ventures, and she succeeded. Once she reached her goal, she and Keith relocated to the islands of Bocas del Toro. They loved it and decided to settle there. Their relationship grew stronger, and in 2005, they held a small wedding ceremony in the presence of close friends and family. In the timeline leading up to Cher's disappearance, detectives found it suspicious that she vanished soon after her divorce from Keith. They speculated that the two incidents might be connected and suspected that Keith knew more than he admitted. However, he has consistently denied any involvement in her disappearance. He claims they divorced amicably, despite Cher's feelings of hurt. He insisted he had no motive to harm her. As he stood to gain nothing, there was no inheritance or insurance payout involved. Their relationship had been legally dissolved. He also provided an alibi for the period of Cher's disappearance, but this was complicated by the fact that the exact time she went missing was unclear. Cher lived alone, and no one could determine precisely when she had disappeared. The investigation was further complicated by the belief among locals that Cher, a kind and well-liked person, could not have had enemies or quarrels with anyone. However, police received information from several witnesses that she had gone on a cruise with a man before her disappearance. The witnesses did not know who this man was. There was also evidence that she had sold all of her possessions to a man named Wild Bill before she disappeared. This was suspicious, as she had been waiting for her sister Judy to arrive and had no plans to leave the area. Furthermore, she did not say goodbye to anyone before she disappeared, which was very strange for someone who was so well connected and friendly with the local community. Wild Bill turned out to be a neighbor and friend of Cher. When questioned, he claimed that she had voluntarily sold her assets to him because she had fallen in love with a new man and decided to give up all her work. His explanation convinced the detectives. They verified the details and prepared to close the case. However, Cher's family does not accept this conclusion. They do not know where she is, and she has not contacted them. Unable to go to Panama themselves, the family asks the police to continue the investigation and seeks the assistance of a local journalist named Don Winner. Don Winner, a journalist for a news site for the expat community in Panama, is fluent in both English, Spanish, and is well-versed in handling complex situations on the islands. He decides to conduct an investigation to help the Hughes family seek justice. When he takes on the case, he is provided with a copy of the police report and other relevant data. During the investigation, he quickly realizes that Cher had no intention of leaving the country. This is puzzling, since a celebrity like Cher would not have disappeared without a trace. As Don continued his investigation, he discovered that Cher was not alone in Bocas del Toro's disappearance. Just 4 months earlier, a 58-year-old antique dealer named Bo Islar had also mysteriously disappeared. Cher and Bo knew each other. Although their personalities were different, she was outgoing and outgoing. He was more reserved. The important thing they had in common was that they had both sold their properties to Wild Bill shortly before they disappeared. Wild then put them up for sale. Bo's family believed he had moved to Argentina, so they did not actively search for him. However, the disappearance of both Bo and Cher raised concerns that there might be a serial killer operating on the islands, kidnapping or even murdering people. This caused panic and fear in the local community. Don continued to investigate and began to suspect that Wild was involved. After Cher's disappearance, he often hosted parties at her house, which was quite unusual. He did not even remove her picture from the wall, which gave off a creepy feeling. Furthermore, he hired someone to renovate her house and then sold it for a higher price. Don believed he was on the right track and began gathering more information about Wild Bill. Witnesses said he owned a gun, which was illegal in Panama. They said they saw him carrying it and heard bullets from time to time. This testimony gave the police a good reason to investigate. Don turned over all the information he had gathered to the police, and they found the evidence compelling. Police obtained a search warrant for Wild's home. During the search, they discovered a grisly collection of Nazi symbols, horror memorabilia, and jars of human teeth and crowns. They also found a large cache of weapons and ammunition. He was apparently obsessed with horror movies, owning a large collection of them, including videos of real-life murders on the dark web. Among the items seized was Cher's handbag, which contained her documents and several credit cards. They also found a cell phone and several personal items belonging to Bo, who had gone missing earlier. However, neither Wild nor his wife were home at the time. Investigators found Cher's dog at her house. When police tried to take the dog away, it kept returning to the house. Each time they took the dog on a boat 1 kilometer away from shore, it jumped off, swam back to shore, and ran straight home. Finally, the dog led them to a location in Wild's backyard. They assumed the dog was trying to point something out, so they decided to search the area. Meanwhile, workers who had renovated Wild's house before selling it were called in for questioning. One of them revealed that Wild had asked him to dig a hole in the backyard to bury his trash. The worker pointed out the exact location, and excavation was scheduled for the next day. During the excavation, investigators discovered the body of a woman in her 40s. Based on the condition of the remains, she had been buried for approximately 3 to 4 months. Dental records confirmed that it was the body of Cher, who had gone missing. Bo's body was also found in the same pit, but in a more advanced state of decomposition, having been buried longer. A third body was discovered nearby, but identification was difficult because the head was missing. The remains were found one after another, one skeleton after another. In total, 5 bodies were found, but the identities of 3 of them remain unknown. Investigators soon turned their attention to Wild. They uncovered that his real name was William Dathan Holbert, a 30-year-old man from North Carolina, USA. In 2007, he moved to the area with his second wife, Laura Michelle Reese. He had an extensive criminal history and was wanted in 6 states for various offenses. Neighbors described them as noisy and annoying. His wife, who introduced herself as Gina Cortez, was considered rude and odd. They rarely appeared in public except when attending parties at bars. Gina claimed to be a veterinarian, but when a neighbor sought her help with a dog, she was unable to provide assistance. She explained that her expertise was in large farm animals, like horses and cattle. This has raised doubts about the authenticity of her words. William Dathan Holbert, known as Wilde, was the only child in his family. His father worked for a company that manufactured agricultural machinery. He grew up in a beautiful two-story house, was well-educated, and participated in sports regularly. He seemed to have a promising future. He married his first wife, Ryan, in 1998 at just 18 years old. Within a year, they had their first child. Over the next 4 years, they had 2 more children. During that time, he does design work, and his wife was a housewife. After his father died, Wilde and his family moved back to his parents' house and took over the management of the family farm. At this time, neighbors, friends, and relatives began to notice that Wilde had become extremely angry. Many believed that this could be due to his steroid use, but there were also signs that he had mental health problems. He often lost control and attacked his wife and children. His wife Ryan was very concerned about these changes, especially when Wilde, for unknown reasons, wanted to kill the family's healthy and docile dog. Despite his protests, his wife took the dog to the vet, but the vet refused. In a fit of rage, he killed the dog in front of his children and dumped the body. This action shocked and saddened his family and neighbors. During this time, Wilde's business ventures and his father's farm failed. Then he decided to enter politics. He bought some business suits and announced his candidacy for mayor. However, his strange and aggressive behavior caused gossip, and no one took his political ambitions seriously. Despite this, he remained confident and believed he could win. Unfortunately, an incident involving his dog further tarnished his reputation and ended any hopes of a political career. In 2003, Wilde met the Hoover family at a fitness center he frequented. He made an impression as a successful businessman. Unaware of Wilde's previous failed ventures, the Hoover family decided to buy a third gym in 2004 and put him in charge. This was an opportunity for him to prove his ability, but he managed it ineffectively and could not buy the necessary training equipment on time. Instead, he rented an apartment near the gym, which was only a few minutes' drive from his home. He lived there with his mistress, Laura, while maintaining the facade of a normal family life with his wife and children. By 2004, Wilde's wife, Ryan, discovered that he was having an affair with Laura, which led to the breakdown of his family. Around the same time, he secretly to sell the Hoover family gym. This came to light in 2005 when he filed for bankruptcy. After leaving, he left behind tens of thousands of dollars in unpaid bills, loans, and debts. Despite having a monthly income of about $1,600, he was spending up to $4,000 each month. Later, his lover, Laura, opened a Russian-themed bookstore. However, this store also quickly failed. Wilde lived in Santa Fe for a while and worked on various projects. However, he began to run into trouble when he was caught selling culturally valuable items, which turned out to be stolen. After being arrested, he escaped. He and Laura escaped from the police in an SUV. They drove through fields and down dirt roads. They eventually made it to Florida, where they boarded a cruise ship and continued their escape by getting off the ship in Panama. In Panama, they started a business selling motorcycle parts. He began using the pseudonym Ulf, despite being one of America's most wanted criminals. At the time, he was about 20 years old. Interestingly, photos of him from this period show him completely bald. On the islands, however, he grew out his hair to better conceal his identity. During this time, he actively sought advice from lawyers and experts in Panama's legal system, paying particular attention to the procedures required to purchase and register real estate. After buying their first house, they converted it into a bar named Private. There, they hosted parties and invited everyone to join them. Wilde and Laura openly promoted their bar, even placing ads in the local newspaper. However, neighbors were puzzled as to how the bar was kept afloat, as it was clearly not profitable. When questioned about his source of income, he simply replied that he was a millionaire and that he worked for fun. Over time, he began buying and reselling items. Eventually, it was revealed that he was murdering people to seize their property, allowing him to amass a large sum of money and live a comfortable life. As news of Wilde's dark past spread, many local residents fled their homes. Some speculated that he could escape by boat, while others thought he might flee by plane. The remote islands made it easy for him to escape, and with his wealth he could hide anywhere in the world. Forensic experts quickly determined that Cher and Beau had both been killed with a weapon to the head at close range. 3 more bodies were later identified as the Brown family, immigrants from the United States. The family included Mike Brown, his wife, and their school-age son. They had also had contact with the other victims, Cher and Beau, and were all from the same community. Mike owned the house where Wilde lived and ran the bar. When the Brown family disappeared, the new owner, Wilde, announced that he had bought the property from them. As with other victims, law enforcement treated the case as if the family had willingly left. The police stopped searching as soon as they heard claims that people had simply left or traveled elsewhere. It is worth noting that after Mike Brown disappeared, money was still being withdrawn from his account daily, through ATMs. This activity led the police to believe he was still alive, so they did not consider the possibility of his abduction. Over time, the investigation was dropped altogether. It was only when the case was reopened that investigators discovered the withdrawals were linked to a man named Wilde and Laura, who were wanted. The police then began searching for the two. A few days later, a police boat intercepted a ship heading for Nicaragua. Among the passengers were Wilde and Laura. They resisted arrest, forcing an officer to the use of a weapon to subdue them. Before their capture, they had been living in a rented house in Costa Rica. One evening, when they saw a wanted ad on TV, they packed their belongings and attempted to escape. However, someone noticed them and reported their location, leading to their detention. After being arrested, they were charged with the murder of 5 people. However, Wilde refused to give up. He initially maintained his innocence, but when the evidence against him became too overwhelming, he changed his story. He suddenly claimed that Keith owed him $45. This claim was clearly untrue, as Keith barely knew him. Furthermore, there was no logical reason for him to kill Cher and the other neighbors on the island. Keith eventually decided to cooperate with the investigation, which played a key role in uncovering the truth behind the case. However, he feared that his testimony might be considered complicity. He faced the possibility of ending up in prison alongside Wilde, but Wilde later admitted that he had framed Keith and that Keith had nothing to do with the murders. Wilde eventually confessed that he had not only killed Beau and Cher, but also the Brown family. He detailed how he had murdered them in several different locations. Thus, in the 4 years he had lived on the island, he had killed a total of 5 people. According to Wilde's testimony, he invited Cher to dinner to discuss buying her property. She agreed to the meeting, but later that evening, he lured her to the backyard and attacked the back of her head from close range. He then placed her body on an ATV, drove it to a dump on his property, and hid it in a pre-dug hole. He covered the body with dirt and ordered the workers to bury it carefully, while they were completely unaware that they were assisting in a crime. He used a similar method to conceal the evidence of his other murders. His motive was simple greed. He wanted to take their property for himself and was willing to kill to achieve his goal. One day, Wilde got into a fight with another American immigrant and killed the American. He casually buried the body afterwards. He expressed regret and sorrow over his actions during a conversation. However, Laura has steadfastly denied any involvement in the crime. She claimed she knew nothing about what he had done and insisted she had no role in it. This claim was hard to believe. As a result, she was charged with complicity. 11 days after her body was found, Cher's friends and family held a funeral for her. She was buried on the island of Bocas del Toro, which she considered her paradise and her final resting place. The farewell ceremony took place on the highest point of the island, where her ashes were placed in a small hole, and a memorial tribute was set on a tree to honor her. Prosecutors asked for life sentences for both William and Laura. However, the legal process in Panama moved very slowly. Even so, the prosecutor insisted that they would not be lenient with the killers. William Dathan Holbert, also known as Wild Bill, confessed his guilt in court. He was sentenced to 47 years in a local prison, and Laura Michelle Reese was sentenced to 26 years for being an accessory, although she did not admit to helping her husband. In court, neither showed any remorse. After being imprisoned, they divorced. Despite their imprisonment, they were not too upset. In 2015, Laura remarried Sadovnikov. While serving his sentence, Wild established a church that gained official recognition from the Panama Prison Service. He proudly called himself the advisor of this religious organization and began representing Panama in defending the rights of those serving prison sentences. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Autumn Taggart. In 2018, Autumn Taggart was a single mother living in Windsor, a city near the US-Canada border. She resided about a mile from the border that separates Michigan, USA, from Ontario, Canada, with her 9-year-old son, Gavin. On Saturday, June 9, 2018, Autumn, Gavin, and Chris Sherwin, Gavin's father and his Autumn's ex-husband, spent the afternoon together. Despite their breakup, Autumn and Chris had remained on friendly terms, prioritizing their co-parenting of Gavin to minimize the negative effects of their divorce. By the late afternoon, they went grocery shopping together. Afterward, Chris drove Autumn and Gavin to the building where they lived on the 3rd floor. After saying goodbye, Chris returned home. Before bed, Gavin played video games with his mother. He had no idea later that night would turn into a terrifying nightmare. Later that night, while it was still dark, Gavin woke up to a strange noise. He opened his eyes to find an unfamiliar man standing next to his bed. The stranger instructed Gavin to close his eyes and go back to sleep. Then he left Gavin's room. Gavin heard his mother scream a minute later, and the sound sent a chill down his spine, filling him with a sense of dread. A few minutes passed, an eerie silence filled the air. His mother's screams had stopped, and he eventually drifted off to sleep. In the morning, Gavin got out of bed and rushed to his mom's room. The room was in disarray, with everything smashed and destroyed. His mom, Autumn, was lying motionless on the bed. At first, Gavin thought his mother was just sleeping, but the blood on her nose made it clear something was seriously wrong. As the devastating truth set in, that his mom had passed away, it shocked him. Gavin didn't want to believe it was true. Desperate to escape the pain, Gavin spent the morning playing video games and watching YouTube, trying to distract himself from the truth. However, as the day wore on, the emotions became too much to bear. In the afternoon, Gavin broke down in tears and knew he had to tell someone what had happened. Gathering his courage, Gavin went back to his mom's room, grabbed her phone, and texted his dad, Chris, on Messenger. With shaking hands, he typed out a message, telling his dad that Autumn wouldn't wake up. As soon as Chris received the message, he and his girlfriend rushed to Gavin's house. After parking, Chris exited his car and saw his son standing behind a sliding glass door on the 3rd floor of the building. Since Chris didn't have an electronic key to enter, Gavin came downstairs to let him in. Chris then asked his son to stay with his girlfriend while he checked on Autumn, who was not waking up. Upon entering the apartment and bedroom, Chris found Autumn pale and bruised, with a bloody nose. He immediately called 911, and the police and ambulance responded to the scene. However, the paramedics declared Autumn dead due to the severity of her injuries and evidence of a struggle in the bedroom, ruling out the possibility of an accident. As investigators searched the apartment for evidence, a specialist interviewed Gavin to gather more information. The boy revealed that a stranger had entered their house and told him to go back to sleep. He reported hearing his mother's screams, which eventually stopped. Gavin also described the man he saw in his room, recalling that the man was of average height, white, and had disheveled hair, appearing as though he had just woken up. The boy's testimony described the suspect as skinny but not extremely so. A forensic examination after Autumn's death concluded she died from strangulation, with visible signs of a prior beating and genital injuries. Male DNA was also found on Autumn's body. The police investigated to answer three main questions: how did the perpetrator gain entry to the apartment, what was the motive behind the crime, and most crucially, the identity of the suspect. The police quickly ruled out the possibility that the killer was a tenant in the building. Since Gavin was familiar with all his neighbors, and the man he saw on the night of the crime was a stranger to him, this led them to look elsewhere for a suspect. To enter Autumn's apartment, the perpetrator needed more than just an electronic key to the building. However, there were no signs of forced entry on the door leading to the apartment. This initially led investigators to consider two possibilities: Autumn might have let the perpetrator in herself or forgotten to lock the door. Investigations later revealed that neither assumption was correct. The perpetrator had instead climbed to the third floor, starting from the balcony on the second floor, then accessing the apartment Autumn's as the door was open. Along with a DNA sample, the police found fingerprints at the scene and sought to identify the owner. It was 12 days after the body was discovered that the police released the victim's identity in hopes of gathering tips from the public. Anyone with potential information about the case was asked to contact detectives. On the night of the crime, a witness reported seeing a new black SUV, believed to be a Honda Pilot, in the parking lot next to the building. The SUV was present until around 6 a.m. Detectives suspected that the SUV's owner might be connected to Autumn's death, speculating that the perpetrator could have used the vehicle's roof as a stepping point to access the balcony. This building had distinctive protrusions at its corners that could have aided the perpetrator in climbing from the second floor to the third. During their investigation, police analyzed mobile phone activity around Autumn's residence on the night of the incident. The nighttime occurrence actually simplified their task, as most people were asleep, resulting in fewer active phone numbers in the area. Detectives discovered that one of the phone numbers belonged to Autumn's neighbor, Michelle. Although Michelle lived in the same building as Autumn, she said in an interview with police that she knew nothing. However, phone records showed that not only was Michelle on the phone while in her apartment, but she also traveled throughout the city multiple times. Additionally, she had turned off her phone around the time of the incident. While the phone's location indicated she was either in or near her apartment at the time, the exact location was difficult to pinpoint due to the inherent margin of error in location tracking. Detectives went back to question Michelle again, sensing she was hiding something about the case. At first, she denied knowing or hearing anything, but when police warned her that withholding information could make her an accomplice, she opened up. Michelle revealed that around 2 a.m., a man named Jitesh Bogle contacted her and her boyfriend, seeking to buy an illicit substance and was interested in hiring an escort girl. Michelle and her boyfriend agreed to meet Jitesh. They first stopped at an ATM, where Jitesh withdrew cash. Then, Jitesh purchased some of the substance from Michelle and her boyfriend, who were its dealers. However, Jitesh asked them to sell him more. Michelle instructed Jitesh to drive to the parking lot near her building. Once they arrived at the building, the three of them took illicit substances. Then, Michelle and her boyfriend decided to steal the remaining drugs and escape, leaving Jitesh behind. Remarkably, before running away, Michelle hid a bag of this addictive substance in her genital area. Although the details of how she did this are not provided, it is an important fact that will become relevant later. According to Michelle, she and her boyfriend grabbed the substance and some of Jitesh's cash and ran to the building's entrance. They then entered their apartment and locked themselves in, remaining quiet and keeping the lights off. Since Jitesh didn't have an electronic key, he was unable to enter the building. He also refrained from shouting or honking his car horn, fearing someone would alert the police. From their apartment window, Michelle and her boyfriend observed shoe marks on the roof of Jitesh's car. Jitesh drove away around 6 a.m. Investigators hypothesized that Jitesh had attempted to sneak into the building to retrieve the stolen substance and money. However, not knowing Michelle's apartment, he likely entered Autumn's apartment by mistake. The police now have the phone number and photo of suspect Jitesh. The image was captured from a bank security camera, where Jitesh had withdrawn cash to purchase the substance, and an ATM camera also took his picture. After verifying the phone number, investigators discovered that he was a 27-year-old Canadian citizen. He worked as a car development engineer in Warren, Michigan, and owned a black Honda Pilot SUV. Initially, Jitesh regularly commuted to Windsor, Canada, by crossing the river via bridge or tunnel. However, authorities tracked his movements, revealing he had left Canada on the morning of June 10, the day Autumn died, and he has not returned to the country since. Following the release of information about a black SUV at Autumn's house, Jitesh sold his vehicle. The Canadian police collaborated with their American counterparts, learning that Jitesh planned to relocate from Michigan to Washington State, where his parents resided in Kent. After relinquishing his job and left Canada, Jitesh's actions raised suspicions. Nevertheless, the police required concrete evidence to make an arrest and facilitate his extradition to Canada. To investigate Autumn's death, the Windsor police sought assistance from the U.S. National Security Agency to track Jitesh's movements. A DNA sample found on Autumn's body likely belonged to the suspect, Jitesh, but a confirmed match was needed. Jitesh, attempting to evade detection, made several attempts to disguise himself. He shaved his beard and wore blue contact lenses to alter his appearance. However, Jitesh eventually made a mistake. During a visit to a bar in Warren, he left behind a used glass, which U.S. agents seized to obtain his DNA. The comparison of Jitesh's DNA to the DNA on Autumn's body took time, but the outcome was predictable. The test confirmed that the DNA on Autumn's body belonged to Jitesh. On August 17, 2018, over 2 months after Autumn's death, Jitesh was arrested at his parents' residence in Kent, Washington. The arrest caught Jitesh off guard, as he seemed to believe he had evaded detection. U.S. authorities have initiated the process of extraditing Jitesh to his home country. In the extradition documents, the prosecutor stated that Jitesh is a threat to society, at risk of fleeing, and unpredictable. Following this development, Canadian police charged Jitesh with the murder of Autumn Taggart. Due to national restrictions, it was not until November 2021 that Jitesh's trial took place. The trial was held across 3 separate courtrooms. In the main courtroom were the judge, the prosecutor, the jury, Jitesh, and Jitesh's defense team, all present for the proceedings. 2 additional courtrooms were equipped with large screens to broadcast the trial to Autumn's family members and other attendees. During the trial, Jitesh pleaded not guilty to the first-degree murder charge. He claimed that Autumn's death was accidental. According to Jitesh, on the night in question, Michelle and her boyfriend stole money and an illicit substance from him. The incident upset Jitesh, prompting him to exit his vehicle and pursue Michelle. However, due to his intoxication from consuming a substantial amount of alcohol and substances, Jitesh's memory of that night's incident is very limited. He recalled entering Autumn's apartment after climbing onto the balcony. However, he claimed he mistook her for Michelle, someone he believed had previously robbed him, on he finding Autumn asleep in her bed. Autumn woke up and screamed, but Jitesh immediately ordered her to be quiet. However, she continued to scream, and in an attempt to silence her, he covered her mouth with his hand. Unfortunately, this action caused Autumn to suffocate. Jitesh later claimed that he did not realize he had caused Autumn death until her screaming stopped. He attempted to revive her with CPR, but it was unsuccessful. Additionally, Jitesh did not recall how Autumn sustained genital injuries or how he left her apartment. His lawyers argued that the crime was not premeditated, citing Jitesh's extreme intoxication and inability to control his actions as the reason. According to them, his actions, including covering Autumn's mouth to silence her, were not a deliberate to take her life. According to defense attorney Peter Thorning, Jitesh was too drunk to fully understand the consequences of his actions. Peter emphasized that Jitesh's behavior could be attributed to his intoxication, and that the tragic outcome was unintentional, stating, "Sometimes terrible things happen without us intending the result, and that is what happened in this case." The lawyers pointed out a crucial aspect of the case: there was no evidence that Jitesh had engaged in intercourse with Autumn. This detail is significant, as it could impact Jitesh's sentence. Although Jitesh's DNA was found on Autumn's body, it was not seminal fluid. The lawyers argued that the appearance Jitesh's DNA could be the result of cross-contamination, where DNA is transferred from one surface to another. This could have occurred through the gloves of a forensic expert, for example. Jitesh's lawyers attempted to prove that John Lord, who worked in the forensic unit during the investigation, mishandled evidence and accidentally transferred their Jitesh's DNA to Autumn's body. John Lord's responsibilities included photographing the crime scene and collecting evidence that came into direct contact with Autumn. The defense lawyer, Peter Thorning, suggested that John Lord may have caused cross-contamination by rotating the body on the bed sheet, which was seized as evidence. This action could have resulted in the transfer of DNA or fluids between the body and the sheet. During cross-examination, John Lord testified. Peter Thorning asked John Lord if he had received proper training to work as a forensic identification expert. John Lord replied that he had taken precautions to prevent cross-contamination by changing gloves between handling each piece of evidence and using his camera to take photographs. John Lord searched Autumn's room for fluids such as urine, saliva, and semen. The reason for this search is that the likelihood of a sexual assault is higher when the victim is female. During the trial, John Lord testified that he found no indication of a sexual assault based on his search for fluids. John Lord stated in court that his investigation did not reveal any signs of a sexual assault on or around Autumn's body. He also did not find any evidence of a struggle. According to John Lord, a typical struggle usually leaves behind signs such as forced entry, tampered locks, or blood spatter, but none of these indicators were found at the crime scene. In contrast, the prosecutor offered a different perspective. Referencing a past instance where Michelle hid a substance in her genital area, the prosecutor suggested that the defendant knew about this and searched Autumn's body in the same area. He claimed that even though Jitesh used his hand, the act was still a form of assault. The prosecutor expressed strong disapproval of Jitesh's actions. During questioning by the prosecutor, Jitesh was asked why he did not immediately call 911 when Autumn stopped breathing. Jitesh responded, he disagreed, although the context of this response is unclear. Jitesh expressed his fear that the police would not believe him if he reported what happened. During his testimony, Jitesh admitted that he had limited recollection of the incident that transpired in Autumn's room. However, he specifically remembered performing CPR on Autumn after she stopped screaming, which involved administering 15 chest compressions and 3 rescue breaths. The prosecutor questioned Jitesh's claim that the strangulation of Autumn was accidental. The prosecutor argued that if the defendant's intention was simply to silence Autumn, he could have achieved this by covering her mouth, rather than also closing her nose. This deliberate action, the prosecutor suggested, indicates that the defendant understood the consequences of his actions. Autumn's son, Gavin, also provided testimony during the trial. Gavin's testimony was given in a separate room from the main courtroom, accompanied by a support worker. Gavin said someone came into his room and spoke to him, but he doesn't remember what they said. The person stood close to him, but they didn't touch him. After they left, Gavin heard his mother screaming in the distance. This part of the experience felt like a dream, but eventually it stopped and he fell asleep again. And he woke up in the morning. The next morning, Gavin went to his mother's room and found it in disarray. Everything was knocked over, broken, or destroyed. At first, he thought his mother was just sleeping, but then Gavin noticed blood on her nose and realized that she was actually dead. He was in shock and couldn't process what he was seeing. Despite feeling overwhelmed, Gavin tried to cope with the situation by carrying on with his day as usual. Gavin recalls spending part of that day playing games and watching YouTube videos. It wasn't until later in the day, June 10, 2018, that he finally mustered the courage to send a message to his father using his mother's phone. He couldn't keep what had happened to myself any longer and needed to tell someone. Chris Sherwin, Autumn Taggart's ex-husband and the father of Gavin, testified about his last contact with her. He received a text message from her around 12:30 a.m. on June 10th. When he sent another text message the next morning, there was no response. This is when he began to worry. Later, he received a text message from Autumn's phone, which turned out to be from their son. A copy of these text messages was presented in court for the jury to examine. On December 1, 2021, a 12-member jury found Jitesh Bogle of first-degree murder, but they did not find sufficient evidence that he had intercourse with Autumn. On January 5, 2022, the court sentenced Jitesh Bogle to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Jitesh appeared in jail via video, dressed in an orange jumpsuit and wearing a black mask. He sat with his back against a wall, away from the camera. When the judge asked if he wanted to say anything, he expressed his feelings of sorrow and remorse. Jitesh said, he find it difficult to put into words the sorrow and remorse he feel. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Lindsay Lee. On Monday, March 13, 2017, Lindsay Lee, a 31-year-old woman, had a busy day. After finishing her work shift, she attended a martial arts training session at the gym. Following her workout, she went to the supermarket for groceries and returned home around 8:30 p.m. Exhausted, Lindsay looked forward to resting since she needed to be at work in the morning. She works full-time as an IT specialist at the local police station. At the end of the day, she returned to her 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house on Halley VD. However, at that moment, she was faced with an unexpected threat waiting for her inside her own home. As she entered the house, she was ambushed as soon as she closed the door. On March 14th, it seemed like just another weekday for the Sheriff's Department in Lexington County, South Carolina, where Lindsay worked. Officers arrived early, but it was quickly apparent that Lindsay had not shown up yet. She was always energetic and was usually one of the first to arrive at the sheriff's office. Her co-workers were immediately worried and surprised when they didn't see Lindsay at work. First, they texted her, but she didn't respond. Next, they tried calling her, but Lindsay didn't answer. This behavior was unusual for her. She was known for being punctual and was usually one of the first to arrive at the office. Even when she was sick, she always informed her coworkers. After failing to reach Lindsay, the police contacted the patrol unit. A nearby police car was dispatched to check on her. The assigned officer was Shannon Lovell, who was also a close friend of Lindsay's. He arrived at her home around 10 a.m. and knocked on the front door, but received no response. So he decided to go around to the back door. He carefully examined the scene and noticed the first signs of trouble. The back door was heavily damaged. He quickly concluded that someone had broken into the Lindsay's house. Shannon promptly called for backup. His fellow officers arrived within minutes. Together, they entered the Lindsay's house, unaware of the horrifying scene that awaited them. They heard running water and assumed that Lindsay might be taking a shower and hadn't heard them. Remaining cautious, the officers ascended to the second floor and approached the bathroom, where they heard the water noise behind a curtain. When they pushed the curtain aside, they discovered Lindsay's body lying in an unnatural position. The bathtub was filled with blood, and she had a deep 10 centimeters cut on her throat. Lindsay was born in September. Her family lives in Arkansas. When Lindsay was 5 years old, her younger sister Carista was born. As Carista grew older, the sisters developed a close bond and became best friends. Lindsay served as a role model for Carista, who eagerly followed her sister's interests and activities. It was no surprise that Lindsay became the family's fashion icon, influencing Carista's style. Whenever Lindsay tried something new, like roller skating, Carista would eagerly join in the next day. The children grew up in Heber Springs, Arkansas, but job opportunities in that suburb were limited. Then her father joined the Army. His military career led to frequent moves for the family, starting with a move to California, which was very different from their small-town life. The family continued to move around, living in many different cities and states before finally settling in South Carolina. This constant moving helps children adapt quickly to new environments, which contributed to Lindsay's development. With her bubbly personality and confidence, she had no difficulty communicating with others. From a young age, Lindsay showed intelligence, especially in math and science. However, throughout high school, she struggled with her weight. This led to feelings of low self-esteem and made her a target for ridicule. Despite these challenges, Lindsay remained focused on her future. In the early 2000s, Lindsay attended Midlands Technical College in Columbia, South Carolina. Due to her high GPA, she received a scholarship in 2004. By 2008, at the age of 23, she was working at a local bank. One day, an attractive mechanic named Jason Lee, who was 29 at the time, came in to repair a broken safe. They struck up a conversation and felt an instant attraction. The next day, Jason asked Lindsay out, and after a few meetings, they officially started dating. On a date, the couple went boating at sunset. Jason asked Lindsay to go on a dolphin-watching adventure. However, he had more exciting plans for Lindsay. As the sun set over the horizon, Jason proposed to her and Lindsay accepted his proposal. Jason was not only handsome and romantic but also a talented guy. The couple shared many common interests, and whenever there was a problem, Jason was always ready to help Lindsay without hesitation. Whether her car broke down or there was any other problem, he could easily handle it. Both of them were kind, cheerful, and had similar personalities, which further strengthened their relationship. The couple got married 2 years after they met, in 2010. Lindsay was so captivating that Jason couldn't help but cry tears of joy. However, they weren't very active, which led to weight gain. In 2014, Jason decided to start going to the gym to address this issue. He quickly began encouraging Lindsay to join him, but she resisted the idea of exercising for a long time. Jason's trainer, Graham Hockley, was a tough and straightforward Brit who helped him get back in shape. By 2015, Jason had transformed and looked much more athletic. As Jason began his sports training, Lindsay noticed his progress and decided to join him. They both trusted their trainer, Graham. Initially, Lindsay didn't like him much because he pushed her hard and didn't pay attention to her complaints. However, this tough approach worked. After a few months, Lindsay had a remarkable transformation. Her training became easier, she got in shape, and she felt more attractive. Eventually, Graham suggested that they try martial arts. After some hesitation, they agreed. Graham was an expert, helped improve various aspects of Lindsay's life. He created a nutrition and training program for them that helped them get fit, and he introduced them to judo. This challenging sport would help Lindsay and Jason become real athletes. Within about a year of training, she lost over 50 kilograms. She not only looked different but also felt healthier. Lindsay no longer struggled with shortness of breath or joint pain. Fitness became a vital part of her life. She eagerly attended every training session and was determined not to miss any, no matter what. Lindsay's success and transformation were evident to everyone around her. Her close friends admired the changes in her life, and she even participated in an advertising campaign organized by her coach. Lindsay was truly inspired by her transformation and new image. She diligently followed all of her coach's guidance, including sticking to a strict diet. Because of her determination, she even won awards in several amateur tournaments. This achievement motivated her to encourage her entire team at work to get involved in sports, which boosted her self-confidence immensely. Eventually, Lindsay realized she needed significant changes in her personal life as well. Her marital bliss was deteriorating. Over time, she and Jason started to drift apart. Jason had long since stopped making progress in his own training, and eventually, he quit altogether. He wanted Lindsay to stop playing sports too, partly because he feared she might develop a romantic relationship with her trainer. Over time, Jason became convinced that Lindsay was cheating on him, even though he had no proof. Lindsay's friends and acquaintances were familiar with Graham. However, Lindsay remained faithful in her marriage, or at least that's what everyone believed. Despite this, Jason's jealousy and suspicion grew stronger. An important factor that worsened their relationship was their different views on having children. At the beginning of their marriage, and even before. They both agreed not to have children in order to focus on their careers and themselves. However, Jason later changed his mind and wanted to have children. But Lindsay remained steadfast in her choice, valuing her independence. This difference in views left Lindsay facing a difficult decision. After 6 years of marriage, she chose to ask Jason for a divorce, realizing that she could not provide him with what he wanted. She was not ready for children and was determined to move forward, but not in the direction Jason wanted. The couple separated in April 2016 and updated their social media statuses. After the breakup, Jason moved to an apartment in Simpsonville, South Carolina, about a 2-hour drive from their shared home, where he lived with his mother. He quickly found a new job as a mechanic in Greenville, which was only a short drive from his apartment. With the distance between them, it seemed that both of them had started to rebuild their lives. Their divorce was amicable, without any significant problems arising. Jason and Lindsay planned to split their house. She chose to renovate it and sell it herself to split the profits. Since it was a spacious house, she believed that she could sell it for a good price. To assist her in the renovation, Jason helped out, while Lindsay paid for all the materials. Everyone around them saw their divorce as amicable, indicating that the former couple's relationship could remain friendly. By February 2017, Lindsay had significantly transformed her appearance. She changed her hairstyle and hair color, which made her look rejuvenated. Her friends interpreted this change as a signal that she was ready to begin a new chapter in her life. The formal conclusion of her divorce was planned for April 2017. However, this event never occurred, as Lindsay's body was discovered in her bathroom on March 14, 2017. Shannon, the first person to arrive at the scene, was eager to take charge of the investigation but was denied access to the case. As a close friend of Lindsay, he struggled to remain impartial. And her death deeply affected him and the other police involved in the investigation. The police were confused. Lindsay had good relationships with everyone, even her ex-husband, with whom she had parted on friendly terms. With no leads in the case, the police turned their attention to her husband, Jason, who was in the process of divorcing her. They found him working at a metalworking shop in the county. Upon hearing the news of Lindsay's murder, Jason broke down in tears. He immediately agreed to accompany the police to the station and answer their questions. Without waiting for detailed inquiries, he began to recount the events leading up to his wife's murder. Jason explained that on Monday, March 13th, he had a severely injured leg and was in pain at home. To manage the discomfort, he took a painkiller and went to bed. The next morning, he discovered that his car was missing and assumed it had been confiscated due to his overdue rent. He tried to convince the police that he couldn't have reached the crime scene. However, the police noticed suspicious scratches on his face, which he claimed were from grooming, even though the wounds did not look like typical shaving cuts. The police collected DNA samples from him, which he willingly provided. Police then searched Lindsay's home for evidence. A forensic scientist discovered several suspicious items there. It appeared that the attack had occurred nearby, as there were products that Lindsay had purchased before returning home scattered around. She was last seen alive walking home from a local supermarket, confirmed by a Walmart receipt and surveillance camera footage. The footage showed her calmly walking through the store, cramming a basket full of fruits and vegetables. No one was following her, and police were able to track her movements almost to her front door. Throughout the entire journey, Lindsay did not look back and appeared calm, suggesting that she was not being followed or threatened. It is possible that her attacker was waiting for her inside her home. Later, one of the patrol officers called the police station. He reported that on March 14th, he saw a man driving a car on the street who looked like Jason. The man had a large scratch on his cheek and was acting aggressively, accusing the officer of damaging his car, although the officer had just been standing by. The patrol officer didn't notice anything else suspicious, so he let the man go but remembered his odd behavior. He recalled this encounter as soon as he heard about the investigation and saw a photo of Jason. Surprisingly, the incident happened in the parking lot of the supermarket where Lindsay was shopping. Luckily, the patrol officer remembered the license plate number. When he checked, he saw that the car was registered to Jason. This meant that his car had not been impounded. The officer then reviewed the supermarket surveillance footage. On March 14th at 5:17 a.m., surveillance footage captured a car entering the parking lot and a figure resembling Jason exited the vehicle. The poor lighting and grainy quality of the video made it difficult to clearly identify the person. After disappearing into the darkness, he reappeared 50 minutes later in his work pickup truck, which he parked next to his car. Within 4 minutes, the Jason searched the trunks of both vehicles, likely moving the murder weapon during this time before disposing of it. Police did not find the knife that killed Lindsay. Jason admitted to lying a little about the car being impounded, saying he had gone to the parking lot that morning to buy groceries. Although Jason had previously claimed that he was at home resting on strong painkillers at the time of the murder. When police searched his apartment, they discovered a package of latex gloves that matched the gloves found at the crime scene, along with 3 small pieces of similar blue gloves. Police believe Jason used latex gloves to hide his fingerprints. However, no additional evidence was found, and Jason's car was even washed. On March 17, 2017, just 3 days after Lindsay's murder, 38-year-old Jason Lee was arrested and charged with first-degree murder and first-degree burglary. He was jailed without bail and could face life in prison or the death penalty under state law. He shocked Lindsay's family and friends, but he maintained his innocence throughout the trial. The trial took place in November 2019. Prosecutors claimed that Jason broke in through the back door while Lindsay was away and waited for her to return. When she arrived home, Jason attacked her, overpowered her, and knocked her to the floor. A struggle ensued, during which he began strangling Lindsay until she lost consciousness. He then dragged her body into the bathroom and attempted to slit her throat with a knife, but Lindsay regained consciousness and fought back. Lindsay had scratches on her face, and her hands were on the floor. In the bathroom, she fought desperately for her life, but Jason was stronger and killed her. The police ran a toxicology test and found no alcohol or drugs in her system. The medical examiner noted that Lindsay had both defensive wounds and signs of strangulation on her body. The crime was clearly motivated by personal reasons. The prosecution believes Jason did not want to divorce his wife and chose to kill her rather than face the possibility of her being with another man. In addition, Jason was struggling with financial problems. He was behind on his car payments, had a lot of debt, and had maxed out his credit cards, leaving him with less than $100 in the bank. He was facing eviction from his apartment and owed Lindsay $1,300, which led to a lawsuit as she sought to recoup the money. During the investigation, it was discovered that Jason had to repay this debt by April 1, 2017, and Lindsay was determined to have him jailed if he did not pay. Inspecting Jason's mobile phone revealed that he had saved Lindsay's contact under the name Greedy for money. This indicated that the divorce proceedings were far from amicable. During this time, Jason began a new relationship and confided in his girlfriend about his financial problems and his troubles with Lindsay. They had previously agreed to split the proceeds from the sale of Lindsay's house, but Lindsay later wanted to keep all the money for herself. On the day of the attack, Jason's co-workers noticed he was limping and complaining of pain in his leg, but the next morning he seemed fine. Another of his lies. Although he told police the scratch on his face was from shaving, but he told his co-workers that he had been scratched by a cat. To avoid detection on the night of the attack, Jason turned off all communications to prevent GPS tracking, which aroused suspicion. He then deleted all information from his phone, including his search history. Some data was recovered during the investigation. Before the body was found, he contacted his tax consultant and requested a tax refund, suggesting he knew his wife was dead and had already removed her from his life. At trial, Coach Graham did not confirm any romantic relationship with Lindsay. He claimed to be a close friend of Lindsay's. Graham told the jury that he had taught her self-defense techniques to help her protect herself from her husband if necessary. He believed the killer was Jason, who had recently had problems with her. The defense insisted that no traces of Lindsay's DNA were found in Jason's home or car, nor on his clothing or in his truck. On November 22, 2019, the jury began deliberating. Just over an hour later, they concluded Jason Lee, 40, guilty of murdering 31-year-old Lindsay Lee, and guilty of burglary. He was ultimately sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Before leaving the courthouse, the Jason reiterated his innocence and vowed to keep fighting for his freedom. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Sydney Stevens. Pinckneyville, located in the United States, is a small town known for its friendly local community and laid-back lifestyle. It is also a great place for fishing enthusiasts. On July 25, 2010, two fishermen were fishing in the near Boku Creek Bridge south of Pinckneyville when they spotted a strange object in the water. Approaching it, they realized it was the body of a girl floating face down. Her right arm was tied with a rope to a concrete block, but the body had risen to the surface due to decomposition and shallow water. The body was in a deteriorated state, making identification difficult. The only clues were a belly piercing and a necklace with a musical note pendant. After checking the information in the database, law enforcement officers discovered that a similar girl had recently disappeared. She was Sydney Stephen, 15, who had gone missing on July 19, 2010, exactly 1 week before body was discovered. Sydney's parents, Tracy and Tim, said she had recently suffered from mental health issues after learning that they had separated shortly before she went missing. She was shocked to learn that Tim, the man who raised her, was not her biological father. This revelation led to a mental disorder and severe depression. She ran away from home multiple times, isolated herself from friends, and even attempted ending her life. To protect her, the family decided to keep her at home under supervision. At this time, she was either cared for by her mother, Tim, or her 17-year-old half-sister, Dakota Wall. The house doors were kept locked, and everything was under control until the morning of July 20th, when her mother found she missing at 6:30 a.m. Tracy suspected something was wrong because Sydney's room was in complete disarray, the dresser was overturned, and belongings were scattered everywhere. She called Dakota, who suggested Sydney had run away again. However, Tracy's concern grew when she saw that Sydney was not logged into social media since the previous evening, which was unusual. Upon inspecting the room, she noticed all of Sydney's personal items were still there, including her purse, phone, shoes, and clothes. It didn't seem like she had run away, it was as if she had left in her pajamas and without shoes. Tracy attempted to locate Sydney but was unsuccessful. Sydney's friends were also unaware of her whereabouts, so Tracy filed a missing Sydney report with the police. The detectives were initially hesitant to take on this case. They knew Sydney had problems, so they thought she just ran away from home again and would come back home later. Therefore, investigators shelved Tracy's testimony and only her relatives and friends participated in the search for her. They searched but in vain. A week later, on July 25, 2010, her body was discovered underwater. Her mother, Tracy, was summoned to the police station to identify her. Tracy immediately recognized her daughter's jewelry and confirmed a belly piercing. Dental records definitively identified the body as Sydney's. Once the body is identified, police need to determine what happened to her. The autopsy revealed shocking details, that is, Sydney was murdered. Forensic experts found evidence of multiple injuries, including gunshot wounds and signs of a violent death. This thing stunned everyone. They could not understand why the suspect could target the young girl in such a brutal way. The day before Sydney disappeared, she had planned to go on a hike with her friends, but her mother did not allow it, which made her very sad. She spent the entire day alone under house arrest. When police investigated the house, they found no signs of a break-in. The doors were always kept closed, suggesting that either a family member let the kidnappers in, or they had a key. The relatives insisted they didn't give keys to any strangers. At the time of the incident, only Tracy and Dakota were in the house. The police began questioning the closest relatives, friends, and Sydney's acquaintance, as those close to the victim are often involved in such crimes. Due to the violent nature of the crime, the investigators suspected a personal motive. Tracy reported coming home around 10 p.m. At that time, Sydney was in one room watching TV. Tracy had taken prescribed medication to sleep in her room. Tim was not home that night, he was on a business trip. The most scrutinized individuals were Sydney's sister, Dakota, and her boyfriend, Chad Bennett, who is 20 years old. They both denied any connection to the crime. Dakota stated that she saw Chad the day before, when he visited her to watch a movie, after which he went to work. Chad confirmed her account. However, detectives were suspicious of Chad because he had a criminal record, which included possession of illegal substances and petty theft. As a result, the police brought in his accomplices for questioning: Carl Dane, 18, James Glazier, 17, and Robbie Mueller, 15. All three were friends with Dakota, the old sister of Sydney. During questioning, the young men were evasive and inconsistent in their statements. Ultimately, they told a similar story but with different details. According to their accounts, on the night of July 19, 2010, Carl, James, and Robbie went to Sydney's house. They had a brutal plan as part of their group ceremony, which required performing an evil deed. The plan was to kill Sydney's mother, Tracy, without leaving any evidence. However, as they were moving around house, Sydney woke up, stepped into the hallway, and called for her mother. The attackers stopped her in time, preventing her from making any noise. They held her mouth and nose so tightly that she lost consciousness. Then, they decide that killing Sydney is enough for their initiation ceremony and they choose not to harm Tracy. They carried her body to the car, but she regained consciousness. They continued to torture, beat, and strangle her until she passed out again. They then disposed of her by dumping her into the water, tying a concrete block to her body so it would sink and so that no one can find the body. However, this plan backfired because, during decomposition, gases are formed, causing the body to eventually float. All three individuals, Carl, James, and Robbie, were arrested on July 28. Their story seemed highly implausible. They initially intended to kill Tracy, but instead killed Sydney. Something was evidently amiss. The police suspected that, besides this heinous crime, they might have raped she, as her trousers were down when the body was discovered. However, none of the suspects admitted to this act. The body's condition was poor because the water had erased all evidence, so the police can't confirm this. About the lowered trousers, they denied rape, they suggesting it was related to the influence of illegal substances. Law enforcement knew that gangs have a hierarchy and strict discipline. Although Chad, the leader, denied his guilt, it was inevitable that he was involved in this crime. In fact, the attack could only have been carried out with his approval, especially since he could not avoid participating in the initiation everyone was talking about. It was known that Sydney had gunshot wounds, but members of Chad's team chose not to mention it, resulting in their statements being unreliable. Sydney was shot with a .22 caliber pistol. Carl, a member of Chad's group, who had once met Sydney, possessed a .22 caliber Ruger pistol. This weapon was quite costly, and Carl claimed he couldn't afford it, saying Chad had given it to him. Under the pressure of skilled police questioning, members of Chad's team admitted that he directed their actions. They agreed to testify against he, even though he continued to deny any involvement in the crime. Consequently, Chad was also arrested, though the police suspected there were more people involved in Sydney's murder. They believed Dakota might have been part of it, but she continued to deny any involvement, asserting that she loved her sister and they had a good relationship. Detectives continued their investigation after noticing many inconsistencies in the story. When speaking with the Sydney family's relatives and friends, detectives discovered that Dakota actually despised Sydney. She usually tries to join Dakota in group activities, which annoyed the group, especially Dakota. Dakota wants to spend more time with her boyfriend, Chad, instead of with her. However, Dakota was responsible for looking after she while their parents were at work and also have to clean and do other housework. Dakota couldn't get rid of Sydney, so she had to put up with it. At Sydney's funeral, Dakota appeared happy during the service. She smiled casually and chatted cheerfully with everyone who came to pay their respects. She seemed unaffected by her younger sister's passing. Police followed Dakota and they later questioned her for several hours. The detectives intentionally confused her with unexpected questions to catch her in a lie. Eventually, she began to disclose some details. She admitted that during a trip to another city, Nashville, she overheard her friends from the group discussing what had happened. This was on July 21st, just 2 days after Sydney disappeared. She said 2 members of the group, James and Carl, were talking about the murder. At first, she thought they were referring to someone else since Sydney's body had not yet been found, but then she realized they were speaking about her 15-year-old sister, Sydney. They discussed how they beat, strangled, and drowned Sydney, then tying body to a concrete block. Dakota began her story by explaining that on July 23rd, she was with Chad's group at Carl's house, where she overheard a conversation about the murder. Carl mentioned having a gun and he shot someone with that gun. Under police pressure, Dakota disclosed more details, admitting that she knew who was in a car parked near the house on the night Sydney disappeared. These individuals were members of Chad's group. They entered the house and did something to Sydney. She confessed this to the officer, but explained that she had been too afraid of they to speak up earlier. However, Dakota's account was becoming inconsistent. In her new testimony, she alleged that Carl had threatened her life if she informed the police. The officers noted her lack of emotion and how careful she was in giving her testimony. Investigators knew that she seemed pleased about Sydney's death, casting doubt on her innocence. To probe further, the police pretended to know everything about the crime, including Dakota's relevance, but claimed they were unclear about the motive. This unsettled she, yet she did not confess to any wrongdoing. The case garnered public attention. They intensely discussed the shocking crime. Rumors circulated widely, including one claiming that Dakota discovered Sydney's diary a few days before the crime, revealing that Sydney had slept with her boyfriend, Chad, 2 years earlier. It is important to mention that 2 years earlier, Dakota had not met Chad, yet this might have infuriated her as Sydney's older sister. However, the romantic relationship, especially between Sydney and Chad, was never verified and was doubtful to investigators since Sydney was only 13 at the time. Although this motive wasn't confirmed, there were several other possible reasons for the murder. The following day, Dakota was called in for questioning again. She alleged that her boyfriend, Chad, who was accused of the crime, had shown disturbing behavior. He was aggressive and often lost control, attacking people frequently. It seems that he cannot avoid committing a serious crime. He had a conflict with Sydney's ex-boyfriend, Bubby. According to Chad's testimony, he heard voices urging him to attack his family. He even set their house on fire. He also allegedly shot his favorite cat, hitting it with 15 bullets. None of these claims were verified. Detectives also knew that at 10 p.m. on the night of Sydney's disappearance, Dakota called he. It's believed that the group members arrived at her house then, possibly asking Dakota to open the door or planning something before the attack. Dakota did not answer the police's questions about Sydney's murder, and it seems she is deliberately trying to mislead the investigation. As a result, she was arrested for obstruction of justice. However, at that time, the police did not have enough evidence to proceed with a trial. Chad admitted to being the leader of a gang called the City Saints, whose members followed his orders without question. This thing might have endangered Sydney's life. Chad, however, insisted that he never ordered the murder of Sydney and denied any involvement, even expressing regret over the incident. Meanwhile, Carl participated in interrogations for 2 days as the prosecution prepared for the trial. He recounted that on the night of Sydney's disappearance, he had been drinking at night. Then, Robbie, also drunk, came to see him and suggested going somewhere. Carl agreed without asking for details, and to feel secure and took a .22 caliber pistol with him. Carl was very emotional during the interrogation and openly cried. This made the detectives question whether he was an accomplice to a terrible murder or no. It was possible that he went for a walk without knowing Robbie planned to kill Sydney. However, the police were skeptical about his tears, as they could be a sign of remorse or a disguise. Carl stated that they picked up James on the way and drove to the Sydney family's house. Robbie climbed over the fence and entered the house while everyone was asleep and Carl waiting outside in the car. After some time, he became worried because they were taking too long. He claimed he went inside to find his friends and leave together. The door from the courtyard was open, providing direct access to the basement where Sydney lived. The police were suspicious that the door might have been unlocked at night, especially since there were no signs of forced entry. It seemed likely that someone helped the criminals approach Sydney unnoticed. Suspicion falls on her sister, Dakota. Carl explained that when they entered the property, they noticed that Sydney had woken up due to the noise. She recognized both criminals, Robbie and James. She asked what they were doing here. Then, she tried to wake her mother and call for help. However, Robbie attacked although she resisted, but they overpowered her. He threw her onto the couch and tied her hands, but she fought back fiercely. He then pointed a gun at her. Likely due to the shock and injuries from the struggle, so she lost consciousness. They were aware of her mental health challenges and her history of running away from home, so they decided to make it look like she had run away again. They removed she from the house through the open door, dragged her to their car, and drove off with her to ensure she wouldn't be found. Halfway through the journey, Sydney regained consciousness and began to resist desperately. Immediately after that, one of the attackers forced her to the ground and strangled her. He kept her in that position for a long time, until she passed out again. They then took she to a river by car, but she regained consciousness again midway. During this time, they claimed that she expressed a desire for intimacy, and they had had intimate relations with her. And the strangulation may have been part of a perverted game. Subsequently, Sydney was shot in anger and thrown into the water. However, this testimony of incident was met with disbelief. It was obvious that the intimate intercourse was not of her own volition. Robbie presented a different account to the police. He stated that Carl played a significant role in torturing the girl. Carl had previously been in a brief 3-day relationship with she, but then she broke up with him because he didn't care about her, after which she began seeing someone else. Afterward, he vowed to take revenge on all the girls who betrayed him, starting with Sydney. At that time, no one expected his anger to lead things so far. Robbie, the youngest in the group, at just 15, insisted that he hadn't harmed anyone. As a new member, he simply followed the others and did what they told him, staying within the boundaries of what was allowed. On October 5, 2012, Chad's group members disclosed new information about the case. The police finally gathered enough evidence to build a full case and charge the group members. That day, they questioned Dakota to understand how the door to Sydney's room could have been left open at night. It's known that due to her mental illness, she could pose a danger to herself. Her mother ensured that she couldn't leave by keeping the door always locked. Sydney was under house arrest during all of this. It became evident that the incident was neither accidental nor mistaken because her mother and Dakota were meant to supervise every evening. During questioning, the police were able to get Dakota to confess. She admitted she left the door open, intending to play a prank on her sister, coordinated with members of the group. Finally, the police obtained this long-hidden confession. Later, Dakota disclosed another crucial detail. Before the crime, she had a meeting with Chad's team members, where they discussed their plans. She admitted they intended to kill Sydney. With this information, everything became clear. Even if Dakota didn't directly participate in the murder of Sydney, she was aware of it and did nothing to prevent it. She knew what was going to happen, so leaving the door unlocked wasn't accidental. She planned it to allow the attackers to enter the house and killed Sydney. Investigators believe Dakota underwent a brutal ordeal to join Chad's group, which explained her aided the killers. Her cheerful behavior at her younger sister's funeral was because she completed the ritual to join the group and get rid of her annoying younger sister. Then, their group celebrated after the murder. Carl later acknowledged his guilt, writing an apology letter to Sydney's mother, Tracy, on August 18, 2010. He admitted that he had done evil and now had to pay with his freedom. Even though he knew that it couldn't bring Sydney back to life, but he asked for forgiveness. Tracy read the letter and believed Carl showed no remorse. Although he was arrested early in the investigation, it took 2 years for them to appear in court. Carl Dane pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and received the 60-year prison sentence. However, before being transferred to a federal prison, he was discovered dead in his cell, with a note expressing regret for his actions. Another member of the group, James, was also found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to 60 years. Robbie Mueller initially sentenced to 37 years, but his sentence was reduced to 26 years after an appeal. He will be eligible for parole in late 2023. The gang leader, Chad Bennett, cooperated with investigators and pleaded guilty to a lesser charge, resulting in a 20-year sentence. He took a plea deal and will be eligible for parole in 2026. Dakota received a 26-year prison sentence, with the ability to apply for first parole by the end of 2023. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Janet Abaroa. For many people, family is the most important aspect of life. However, it can be very challenging to find a partner who will be a supportive and ideal husband and father. Unfortunately, love can sometimes cloud judgment, leading to relationships with people who are far from perfect and may even become a source of distress. Janet Abaroa was born on June 19, 1979, in a small town in Virginia. She was the 7th child in a large family that practiced the Mormon faith, which played a significant role in their lives from a young age. Janet was strong, independent, friendly, and intelligent. She had a deep love for children and always dreamed of becoming a mother. In high school, she played football and basketball and participated in swimming. During college, she continued to play sports for local teams, especially representing the University of Southern Virginia. In 1998, at a college game, Janet met a young football player named Raven, who played for the Southern Virginia men's team. Their relationship quickly turned into a love affair. Although Janet was friendly and outgoing, she was careful to adhere to her religious beliefs and kept her distance. Their relationship lasted for 2 years until Raven proposed to Janet. At the time, Janet was 20 years old and Raven was a year younger. They married in August 2000. To become financially independent, they both took jobs as sales associates at a sporting goods store, which required them to relocate to Durham, North Carolina. The couple rented a house in the suburbs and started their new jobs right away. From the outside, they appeared to have a happy marriage, and friends and neighbors often regarded them as the perfect couple. However, like many relationships, much of their happiness was for show. The couple quickly started facing issues. Janet often told her family and friends that she suspected Raven was cheating on her with various women. At one point, she left their home for a few days but eventually returned. This situation was very challenging for Janet, as she had always dreamed of a strong, loving family and valued loyalty. She felt devastated because she truly loved her husband and did not want to end their relationship. Compounding her difficulties, Janet discovered she was pregnant shortly after Raven admitted to cheating. Although she had always wanted a large family and was excited about the news, Raven's betrayal left her feeling overwhelmed and scared. She did not want to be a single mother. During her pregnancy, Janet grew close to her neighbors and made several friends among them. These friends even spoke to her husband, Raven, urging him to stop cheating on his pregnant wife. It seemed their words had an impact, as he promised to be a better husband. However, Janet remained unsure of the sincerity of his promises, given his history of deceit. Despite her concerns, life appeared to return to normal, especially after the birth of their son, Caden, on October 17, 2004. He became the center of Janet's world. The young family was struggling financially during a crisis. Janet, the mother, had stopped earning an income, leaving Raven as the only provider. However, his salary as a seller was not enough to support 3 people. Their landlord recognized their difficulties and agreed to postpone their rent for 3 months, understanding that the baby would add to their expenses. Despite this support, the couple still faced financial challenges, prompting them to seek assistance from the local church, which helped them in December 2004. The situation took a turn for the worse when their son was just 2 months old. Raven was arrested for stealing merchandise from the sporting goods store where he and Janet worked. He had stolen several tracksuits and sold them online, resulting in over $9,000 in losses for the store. As a consequence, Raven was fired, and overwhelmed by the shame of her husband's actions, Janet also decided to quit her job. Fortunately, Raven did not go to prison, but he was required to pay $10,000 in restitution to the store and received a 2-year probation sentence. Afterwards, Janet and Raven were both unemployed. They struggled financially. With a criminal record, Raven was unable to find regular work, but despite these challenges, the young family managed to make ends meet by working part-time. Janet's family received support from relatives while still holding down her part-time job. A few months later, they were faced with a devastating tragedy. On April 26, 2005, Janet picked up her son Caden from daycare to prepare dinner. That evening, her husband came home, they had dinner together, and after Janet and Caden fell asleep, he went to Mauriceville to attend a local mini-soccer game. When he returned home, he witnessed a horrifying scene. Janet was lying on the floor in a pool of blood. Nearby, Caden was lying in his crib, fortunately, was not injured. In shock, Raven immediately called the police. Reporting that his wife had been attacked and covered in blood, although he could not understand the extent of her injuries. He initially thought she had been shot. When paramedics arrived, they discovered that Janet had not been shot, but had been stabbed multiple times. She died instantly from a wound to her neck. Janet was murdered in a rented house in Gifts. Shockingly, she was pregnant and her unborn child was also killed. The police were horrified by the severity of the murder and needed to find out who could have committed such an act. After examining the crime scene, Janet's body was sent to the forensic laboratory. The autopsy revealed 3 deep stab wounds, one on her left hand, indicating that she had tried to defend herself. The fatal wound was to the neck, where the attacker had severed an artery, causing severe blood loss. With such injuries, Janet would have died within minutes. In addition, experts were unable to determine the exact time of death. At the crime scene, forensic scientists gathered a significant amount of evidence from the victim's body, which required thorough examination. Meanwhile, the police sought witnesses who might identify the likely perpetrator. Naturally, police first interviewed her husband, Raven Abaroa. He was called in for questioning multiple times. His statements helped piece together some of the events leading up to the brutal murder. He reported that on April 26, 2005, he left for Mauriceville to play a mini football match and returned home at 10:40 p.m. When he called for his wife, she did not respond, so he went to the top floor room. There, he found her murdered. Since Raven was away, it was difficult to determine when Janet was killed. The police began investigating potential suspects based on Raven's perspective. He theorized that he believed his wife may have chosen to end her life due to financial difficulties. Raven said that sometime before her death, Janet began to behave strangely. However, Janet's family and friends dismissed this idea. They knew her well and had never heard her express such thoughts. Furthermore, Janet was very religious and would never have considered such an act. At this point, police believed that Janet's death was not voluntary. The injuries she suffered could not have been self-inflicted. Additionally, there were clear signs that someone else was in the house at the time of the attack. A bloody shoe print and a single fingerprint were found near the body. The lack of broken windows or doors suggested that the victim had voluntarily allowed the attacker into the house. There were no signs of a struggle, except for defensive wounds on Janet's arm, suggesting that she had attempted to defend herself from a blow. The attack appeared sudden, especially since Raven said that Janet was asleep when he left. It was also unusual that nothing was stolen from the house except Raven's laptop and a few kitchen knives, which may have been used in the attack. The assassin did not take any other valuables, such as rings, jewelry, or expensive items. Therefore, it does not appear to have been a robbery. At that time, there was no solid evidence against the Raven, so he was released, although police started to investigate him more thoroughly. Following the incident, Raven's behavior became increasingly suspicious. Just a day later, he packed his belongings, took his son, and moved to Utah. This reaction seems understandable, as not every husband can stay in a house where such a violent murder took place. He needed the support of his loved ones, which is why he went to where his family lived. Raven's friends later commented that he did not act like someone who had lost a loved one. He did not seem to care about what had happened to his wife or who was responsible. Raven clearly had no intention of helping find the criminal or bring justice. He did not participate in distributing or preparing the reward notice or any other action taken by the police or the family. Instead, Raven simply left with the child and refused to cooperate further. The police observed that Raven was reluctant to cooperate at first and eventually ignored all requests. While Janet's family devoted all their free time to assisting the police. The police became suspicious when they discovered that shortly before the crime, Raven took out a $500,000 life insurance policy for Janet after her second pregnancy had begun. This was unusual because the family was facing significant financial difficulties and had never purchased such insurance before. Despite lacking funds for essential expenses, Raven managed to pay for the insurance premiums. Furthermore, the Raven contacted the insurance company to claim the payout soon after the attack, even before Janet was buried. All of this raised red flags, and suspicion mounted around the Raven. Police tried to get to know Raven and quickly realized that he had been dishonest from the beginning of his relationship with Janet. He claimed to be a devout Mormon and even said that he had been on a mission to Peru. This story was false. At the time, Raven lived in Salt Lake City, Utah, where he lived a quiet life after receiving his insurance money. During this time, he met Vanessa Pont, a single mother who lived nearby. They soon began dating. Raven was not like other men. His friendly demeanor set him special. He knows how to attract attention, quickly winning Vanessa over with his lies. He gains her trust by claiming that his wife died in a car accident. At the time, Raven is unaware that Janet's family is watching his every move. They discover his suspicious actions and are determined to find out what he will do next, hoping to gather evidence of his involvement in Janet's death. Janet's family quickly discovers that he lied about her death. But why would he tell almost everyone that his wife died in an accident? At first, Vanessa trusts him completely and doesn't want to know the details of Janet's fate. However, her curiosity eventually leads her to the truth. Janet was the victim of an unsolved murder, dead from 3 stab wounds. Despite this, Raven manages to fool Vanessa. He repeatedly complains to her about the police and the public's obsession with blaming him for Janet's death, claiming he had nothing to do with it and that a robber killed his wife. Surprisingly, she believes him. Meanwhile, Janet's family contacts Vanessa, his fiancée. They warn her that Raven can be dangerous and advise her to stay away from him, but she ignores their concerns. She is charmed by him and puts her trust in him. After 3 years together, Vanessa and Raven married. Vanessa experienced Raven's mood swings and frequent tantrums, during which he lost control. His violent behavior left her in fear for her life. Their marriage ended abruptly, lasting only 4 months. As the pressure from the police continued, Raven decided to speak to the press. He expressed hope that the case would be solved and the killer found, so he could be left alone. At the same time, he completely denied any involvement in the crime. During this time, a new police took over the case, determined to ensure justice for the Janet's murder. Janet's family actively supported the police and cooperated with the investigation. In this context, Vanessa's anxiety increased. She frequently questioned whether her husband could have killed his first wife, leading her to doubt his honesty. Vanessa believed he was capable of such a terrible act. Subsequently, she spoke to the media, where she revealed that her ex-husband often acted inappropriately. She recalled the worst moment in their relationship occurring on Christmas 2018. During a dispute that Raven instigated, he locked Vanessa in the bathroom and expressed his desire to hit her, stating he hated her and wouldn't care if she died. This incident marked a turning point that led to their breakup. Vanessa admitted she was very afraid of Raven and believed he would easily harm her, just as he likely did with his ex-wife. The new police believe that Raven is responsible for this crime. The main challenge is Raven's alibi for the night of the murder. Around the time Janet was attacked, he was at the stadium playing mini soccer, and several witnesses have confirmed this. Furthermore, shoe prints found at the scene do not match Raven's shoes, and bloody fingerprints on the door do not belong to Raven. However, there is something troubling about his behavior. The police called Raven to ask him a few questions over the phone. Raven repeated his story, but he did not remember many details. This raised suspicions. Raven claimed the knife had gone missing from his home on the night of the attack, discovered during a move. He said that the police did not find the knives because they did not conduct a thorough investigation, which made him doubt their ability to catch the criminal. Meanwhile, the police believed that they had not missed anything because forensic experts had spent a lot of time carefully examining the crime scene. For years, the investigation was unsuccessful. However, circumstantial evidence pointed to Raven as a suspect. Police spoke with Raven's former girlfriends, all of whom described him as very aggressive and prone to violence. Police also discovered that, on the evening of the attack, Raven locked his dog in the garage, something he had never done before. Police believed this action was significant, thinking that Raven may have feared that the dog would protect Janet and prevent him from committing the crime or attract attention to the house by barking. Police discovered that the day before the crime, the Raven transferred data from his laptop to another storage device. This raised suspicions of premeditated murder since the laptop was reportedly stolen. On February 1, 2010, based on this circumstantial evidence, the Raven Abaroa was arrested on suspicion of first-degree murder and extradited to North Carolina. However, the evidence against him was insufficient, being entirely circumstantial, so police continued to gather more evidence for the trial. When the police arrived at the crime scene, they thoroughly examined the photos and the victim's body. The police noticed an open, empty contact lens case on the table next to the bed. This suggested that the Janet might have been wearing her lenses at the time of the crime. However, her parents insisted that she never went to bed with her lenses in. She always removed them before sleeping. This begs the question, was Janet killed before she went to bed and before he left? The forensic expert who conducted the autopsy overlooked whether the Janet was wearing contact lenses, but this was not intentional. Forensic scientists sometimes miss certain details because they seem irrelevant to the case. In this instance, however, the presence or absence of contact lenses could have been crucial evidence against Raven's falsehood. To verify this theory, exhuming the body became necessary. Janet's family supported the idea of exhumation, as they were determined to prove the criminal's guilt and seek justice for their loved one. In July 2010, the body was exhumed, and forensic experts discovered remnants of contact lenses in the eye, although the material was dry and disfigured. However, to convince the jury, a formal examination was needed. It was necessary to verify that the contact lens actually belonged to the Janet. To achieve this, a comprehensive study was conducted over the course of a year. Specialists used pig eyes fitted with contact lenses and subjected them to an embalming process similar to that used on human bodies before burial. The results of the experiments supported the initial hypotheses, confirming that at the time of the murder, Janet was indeed wearing contact lenses, indicating she had not gone to bed. This evidence contradicted the Raven claims. Raven Abaroa's trial began in 2013 and attracted considerable public attention, receiving extensive media coverage. Many people attended the trial. The jury was given detailed information about the facts of the case. Before the trial began, the prosecutor's office stated that they believed Raven was definitely guilty, although there was no direct evidence linking him to the crime. The case was brought to the Supreme Court based largely on circumstantial evidence. However, there was a large body of material that should have convinced a jury of Raven's guilt. Friends and family of Janet said that just a month before her death, she had expressed concerns about her husband. She mentioned that he had serious anger issues and often lost his temper and control. Janet repeatedly expressed her fear of Raven and said she intended to leave him. Janet's mother said she often witnessed heated arguments between the couple. In interviews with police, Raven admitted to having numerous arguments with his wife but adamantly denied any wrongdoing. During the trial, the defense pointed out to the jury that police initially focused on evidence pointing to Raven's guilt, ignoring other potential suspects, and ignored several pieces of evidence. First, a pair of footprints were found at the crime scene that did not belong to Raven. Second, a bloodstain was found on the front door, the DNA of which also did not match Raven. The third important clue that was overlooked was a shoe print that the criminal would have left when he stepped in Janet's blood near the body. The prosecution then relied on the fact that Raven was manipulative, prone to violence, and subject to sudden mood swings. One of Raven's girlfriends expressed her concerns about Raven's potential mental health issues. It was clear that he was cruel and manipulative by nature, frequently communicating with other girls behind the scenes. This behavior suggested that he may have planned the murder carefully and may have misled the police. The lover then recounted an incident where Raven forced her to have sex in a car parked on the side of the road. He acted so aggressively that she had no choice but to comply. She even deliberately left a strand of her hair in the car as evidence in case anything happened to her. One possible motive for the murder, according to the prosecutor, was Janet's unexpected pregnancy. She had only shared this news with a few close people, including some of her sisters. While Janet was excited about becoming a mother, she did not view her husband as the ideal father for the child. Given their challenging financial situation, the prosecution suggested that this news could have provoked anger in Raven. During the investigation, a clear lie from the Raven emerged. Raven maintained that he found his wife dead when he spoke to the police. However, during a confession at a local church, he revealed that when he found her, she was still alive and even attempted to speak to him before losing dying. Police suspected that the Janet was involved in a relationship with another man. She intended to leave her husband and had begun communicating with her ex-boyfriend, Scott. However, their messages suggested that they had only recently started talking and that there was no romantic relationship between them. In March 2014, Raven entered into a plea agreement with the prosecution and pleaded guilty to manslaughter for killing his wife. As a result, he received a 10-year prison sentence, with the possibility of parole after 8 years. Custody of their son was given to Janet's family. Raven was released from prison on Christmas Day 2017. He returned to Utah and still lives there to this day. Janet's family was outraged by the sentence, as Janet can never return, while her husband continues to live his life. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Kaylee Sawyer. Kaylee Sawyer was born on March 2, 1993, in Bend, Oregon. At 23, she is a smart, cheerful, and optimistic young woman. She knows how to cherish every moment in life. She lives with her boyfriend, Cameron Reimhofer, in an apartment near their college. They appeared to be the perfect couple, and Cameron really likes Kaylee's parents. Initially, Kaylee aspired to be a photographer and found some success in that area. However, she later took a job as an administrator at a dental clinic, where she showed her best abilities, as she knows how to approach each patient and make them feel comfortable, even if they are nervous about going to the dentist. While working at the clinic and observing the dentists, she realized that she wanted to become a dentist herself. She felt this was her big opportunity, as people trusted her and felt comfortable seeking dental treatment from her. On Saturday evening, July 23, 2016, Kaylee attended a bachelorette party in the city center with a friend and a few coworkers. They had fun dancing, congratulating a colleague and drinking. Since most attendees were middle-aged, the party ended early, around 10:30 p.m. However, Kaylee and a few other young women decided to go to another bar, where they kept drinking, dancing, and having a great time. At the bar, a man began flirting with Kaylee, and Cameron's friend noticed. Friend sent a message to Cameron, letting him know that Kaylee was there with another guy, which made he angry. After midnight, Kaylee, feeling tired and quite drunk, called Cameron to pick her up. Although he was upset with her, but he went to get her right away. Kaylee was at a restaurant with some friends when he arrived. On the way home, they argued because Kaylee had been drinking heavily and talking to another man. When they reached home, a frustrated Cameron got out of the car and went straight to the apartment. Upset from their argument, she stayed in the car to collect her thoughts. After 10 minutes, when she didn't come inside, Cameron received a text from her. She apologized for her behavior and said goodbye, leaving he confused. He quickly ran to the car, but when he got there, the front passenger door was wide open and she was gone. He called her, and she told him she was out for a walk. She also mentioned that her phone was low on battery, and then the call disconnected. Cameron believed that Kaylee had gone to her friend's house, which was 6 kilometers from campus. He got in his car and drove to her friend's location. Despite he drove slowly and looked around to find her, but he did not see her anywhere. That night, he could not locate her, and her phone went unanswered. He thought she might be out with friends and expected her to return home the next morning. He returned to their apartment and went to bed. However, when he woke up the next morning, there were still no calls from her. And her phone went directly to voicemail. He grew concerned, as this behavior was unusual for Kaylee. Cameron reached out to Kaylee's family to see if they had any information. Her parents told him that she hadn't called them either, but they also believed she could have stayed overnight with friends and would return soon. Cameron then contacted all her friends and co-workers, but no one knew her whereabouts. Growing increasingly worried, he decided to report her missing to the police. When the police arrived, they listened to Cameron's account, but they suggested she would likely return shortly. As a result, the police were in no hurry to search for her. Kaylee did not return home the next day and she missed work. She was a responsible employee who never skipped a day, so it became apparent that something was wrong. The police launched a search for her. Cameron's behavior was odd and caused suspicion. He had shown jealousy towards another man and left in his car to look for her. Her phone suddenly ran out of battery, and Cameron was the last person to have seen her, so he became the primary suspect. Then, he was called in for questioning. During the interrogation, he stuck to his story and cooperated with the investigation by allowing a search of his apartment and car without a warrant. He also took part in the search for Kaylee. Cameron passed a lie detector test, so all charges against him were dropped. The police suspected a man who had flirted with Kaylee might be connected to her disappearance. They began investigating to identify him, seeking witnesses who have seen their interaction or had contact information for him. They eventually located the man, but he was intoxicated that night and couldn't recall many details. He didn't remember Kaylee's name or her phone number and claimed he had not seen her again. The police visited the homes of Kaylee's friends and relatives to check if she had been with them. They only found her car, which she had left at a friend's bachelorette party. This suggested that she had not returned for her car, making it unlikely she had gone elsewhere. Unable to trace her phone, police checked the route she may have taken that night for clues. They looked for signs of a struggle, blood, or surveillance camera footage, but found nothing. Meanwhile, Cameron, along with Kaylee's parents and friends, distributed flyers with her photo throughout the city and shared information about her disappearance on social media. A clue has emerged in the Kaylee case. A rookie police officer named Isabel came to the station with an important story. Her husband, Edwin Lara, who works as a college security guard, had been acting unusually since Sunday. After returning home late from his night shift, he seemed troubled. Eventually, he confessed to she that on the night of Sunday, July 24th, he accidentally struck a young girl with his work vehicle. He claimed the girl was drunk and fell under the wheels, but him unable to stop in time. He also revealed that he hit her body and that her belongings were in their barn. Police quickly arrived at Edwin's home, but he had already escaped. Upon searching the property, they discovered several items: a woman's handbag filled with various personal items and cosmetics, a pair of shoes, strands of light hair, and a large bloody stone. To their shock, these items were also stained with blood. Later, it was confirmed that the hair and belongings belonged to Kaylee, the missing girl. This evidence suggested that Edwin's account of an accident was false. It appeared he had used the stone to harm Kaylee, likely resulting in her death. Despite their thorough search of the house and surrounding area, her body was nowhere to be found. It seemed clear that Edwin had not just vanished, he likely transported the body away in his vehicle. Isabel did not report her husband to the police right away because she feared for her safety. Instead, she pretended to support him and waited some time before going to the police. By then, he had managed to leave the city, making it harder for the authorities to locate him. When the police asked Isabel where he might have gone, she mentioned that his parents lived in Los Angeles, suggesting he could be hiding there. A police officer traveled to Los Angeles, and on the way, they found his car abandoned. They discovered strange notes inside the vehicle, containing numbers and apologies for his actions. The police examined the notes, but they did not lead to any significant clues, and there were no signs of an accident involving the car. They concluded that Edwin was likely heading to his parents' home. Meanwhile, Edwin's phone was not being tracked, and he continued to commit crimes after his escape. He kidnapped a 19-year-old girl named Andrea. He saw her getting into her car after finishing her shift at the store and noticed her using her phone. Quietly, he approached her, opened the passenger door, and got inside her car. Armed with a gun, he threatened her and demanded that she drive him to California. Terrified, she agreed to drive him to California. During the journey, he told her about what he had done to a girl named Kaylee and even showed her a photo of Kaylee along with news articles about his being wanted. He claimed that his car had broken down while he was trying to leave the city and that he was searching for someone to take him to Los Angeles. Edwin initially considered kidnapping a pregnant woman, but he couldn't find one. Instead, he spotted Andrea alone in a parking lot and decided she would be his target. This was terrifying for Andrea, but she tried to remain calm to survive. A few hours later, Edwin thought she was driving too fast and might attract police attention. He ordered her to stop and switch to the passenger seat, then handcuffed her to the car while he took the driver's seat. Andrea realized her only chance of escape was to gain his trust. Andrea said to Edwin that she understood his situation, mentioned that her car was leaking oil, which was true. She suggested they get another car, hoping he might release her. But it didn't work. They stopped at a gas station and a diner, but Edwin instructed her to remain silent and not speak to anyone, otherwise, he will kill her and everyone she talks to. Andrea obeyed and did not talk to anyone, she just trying to signal through her demeanor that something was wrong, but no one noticed. They eventually stopped to spend the night at a motel. Edwin planned to rape her there, and the girl knew this well. Andrea devised a plan to escape. After entering the room, she quietly turned on the alarm on her phone. As Edwin started to bother her, the alarm rang. He became paranoid, thinking it was a police signal and feared he was being followed. However, Andrea said it was a notification so she wouldn't forget to take her medicine. When he asked about her illness, she said she had a venereal disease, causing Edwin to stop bothering her immediately. They lay on opposite sides of the bed, and she was restrained with chains and handcuffs. He tried to sleep but was overwhelmed with panic. Convinced the police were coming for him. Meanwhile, Andrea hoped he would fall asleep quickly so she could make her escape. Eventually, Edwin jumped out of bed and used a disposable phone to call someone, and he speaking in Spanish. Although Andrea couldn't understand him, but he told her they needed to leave urgently. They drove away, but soon the car's oil began to boil. Edwin grew angry and told Andrea they needed to find another car. At that moment, Andrea's hopes for escape vanished. She had anticipated he might leave her with the car and he go on his way, but he had other plans. On their way, they noticed a model car surrounded by several other cars and decided to approach it. An elderly man is loading things into his car. Edwin believed this was the car he was looking for. He took Andrea with him, went to the car, and threatened the elderly man with a gun, demanding the car keys. The man began to call for help, prompting Edwin to shoot at him. Afterward, Edwin grabbed Andrea and ran toward the gas station. By the time the police arrived, the elderly man had survived. At the gas station, Edwin found a car with its doors open. They got inside and drove off, but 3 children were already in the car. A 17-year-old, who had just received his driver's license, was behind the wheel. Edwin threatened little boy with a gun and forced him to drive away from the gas station. The car belonged to a family from Canada who was visiting the US. When the parents returned from shopping at the gas station, they found their car and children gone. They were very frightened and immediately called the police. Edwin ordered the children to throw their phones out the window to avoid being tracked. He claimed to be a dangerous criminal and could kill them all. The children were terrified. However, the teenager convinced Edwin that if he let them go, he would be safer. This was because they would make it more difficult for Edwin to escape, and it would be easier for the police to detect him. He agreed to this. So he dropped the children off at the side of the road and continued driving with Andrea. In a panic, Child realized he still had his phone and called his parents. They, along with the police, quickly located the children. The kids were frightened and reported that they had been kidnapped by a dangerous criminal. They mentioned that Edwin, the kidnapper, had confessed to committing murders. Immediately after that, the police chased after Edwin's car. Edwin regretted his decision to steal the car with the children inside. Aware that the police were after them, he chose to record a video on their journey to California. In the video, he apologized for his crimes and made Andrea post it on her Facebook with a caption that the killers are free. As he grew more paranoid, he told she that he heard helicopters, though she saw and heard nothing. A patrol car began chasing Edwin, and eventually, he was arrested. Andrea couldn't believe she was free, but her nightmare was far from over. After getting out of the car, she was also arrested. Initially, the police suspected she was his accomplice and searched her. They interrogated her, forcing her to prove her innocence. After 18 hours, she was finally released. Police in Bend, Oregon are investigating Kaylee's disappearance and are looking for Edwin because he is the prime suspect. They learned of his arrest and went to the California police station to question him. During the interrogation, Edwin claimed that Kaylee had either been accidentally struck by a car. When police asked for more information, he admitted that he had used a rock to hit her on the head, with the intention of stopping her from screaming, as he believed she was still alive at the time. However, the police informed him that when they checked his car, they found no signs of an accident. Suddenly, Edwin changed his testimony, saying he had intended to pick Kaylee up because he thought she was a prostitute. This seems suspicious because in that area, there are no prostitutes. It is common for students to return home drunk from parties. But usually campus police take these students home. Edwin then gave a seemingly truthful statement. He said that on the night Kaylee disappeared, he was driving his company car around the university area and saw a young, drunk woman walking. Edwin stopped and offered to give Kaylee her ride. Seeing that he was a security guard, she accepted, thinking she would be safe. Unfortunately, he raped her, strangled her, and then killed her by repeatedly hitting her in the head with a rock. He later admitted that he had wanted to kill for a long time and was inspired by serial killers. That night, when he saw Kaylee on the road, he decided she would be his first victim. He had planned other murders for some time. Initially, he was reluctant to reveal where he had disposed of her body, but eventually, he pointed it out to the police on a map. When the police searched the area Edwin indicated, they found a mutilated body that was unrecognizable. The cause of death was determined to be a head injury from a blunt object. As a result, Edwin Lara was charged with Kaylee's murder, rape, along with other crimes including Andrea's kidnapping and carjacking. He was taken to Oregon, where he faced the death penalty. During the trial, he asked to call his lawyer, but that request was denied. During the interrogation, Edwin confessed to the murder, but his testimony was excluded and was not considered at trial. The prosecution needed to prove that Edwin was the one who killed Kaylee and committed other crimes. However, they have a lot of evidence, including items found in his shed. His DNA was on Kaylee, testimony from his wife, and Andrea's testimony where he described Kaylee's murder. The prosecution wanted to ensure that Edwin would be sentenced to life without parole. Edwin reached a plea deal with the prosecution, admitting to attempted murder and kidnapping, but he would not admit to rape in return for a life sentence. In the end, Edwin Lara was found guilty and received 2 life sentences without the possibility of parole. Subsequently, Kaylee's family sued the university, claiming it failed to properly conduct a psychological evaluation or gather vital information when hiring Edwin as a security guard. They emphasized that the college had provided him with a weapon, handcuffs, and a bulletproof vest, which were used during his crimes. This lawsuit was settled for $2 million. After the incident, the college began conducting background checks on all security guards, implemented psychological testing, and strengthened their security policies. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Marbella Valdez. One was born in Tijuana, Mexico's second-largest city, located in the state of Baja California. In 2020, when this case was being developed, one was 40 years old and owned a cleaning company. Although this was his main job, he seemed to have a true passion for the security sector. On one occasion, he interned at the forensic office of the state prosecutor's office. He is still passionate about being a law enforcement officer. Occasionally, he would even go out on the streets dressed in a police uniform. In August 2019, one met a 20-year-old girl named Marbella Valdez. She has a sweet and cheerful personality. She is often called Bella by her family and friends. As a child, she experienced many hardships. At the age of 5, she was sent to an orphanage. She continued to spend the following years in such facilities. According to local pastor David Lopez, who was present when the girl was admitted to the orphanage, she quickly demonstrated her kind nature and goodwill. This helped her win love and respect from the other children, as well as from the staff there. Although facing many difficulties, Marbella still feels optimistic and loves life. At the orphanage, she made friends like Brenda Valdez and Jairo Solana. Brenda became very close to her. Pastor David observed that they were often playing together and always by each other's side during various activities. They always love, help, and protect each other. Brenda took on the role of an older sister who was always there for her. Over time, Marbella started dreaming of a better future and successfully completed both primary and secondary school. She was considered a good student and actively participated in youth religious groups. She realized that progress comes from studying and working hard, so she started selling sweets to her schoolmates at the age of 16 and did extra work as a house cleaner. Fortunately, on her journey to success, Marbella had support. William Messick, an American IT executive, had been helping her and Brenda for some time. In 2014, he started a program to aid orphans from Tijuana, Mexico. His idea is to help children during the most difficult and vulnerable stages of their lives, until they are mature enough to face life on their own. Having been an orphan himself, William understood their struggles. His project included a scholarship program. After meeting Brenda, they formed a close bond, like father and daughter. Brenda told him about her friend, Marbella, from the orphanage, and soon he included Marbella in his program. In 2018, Marbella graduated from high school. She then enrolled at the Autonomous University of Baja California to pursue her dream of becoming a lawyer, with a focus on protecting children's rights. As she entered adulthood, William helped both Marbella and Brenda rent an apartment. Later, when she expressed her desire to live independently, and William once again supported her, acknowledging her maturity and sense of responsibility. During this time, she started university and also looked for a job to support herself. With William's help, she even purchased a car to commute easily between work, university, and home. Marbella started working at a gas station owned by Randy Chicas, a Mexican company that supports women. Her shift began at 5:30 a.m. and ended at noon. After lunch, she would head to the university to study law. Despite her packed schedule, but she made time for church services. It was at the gas station that she met Juan, who owned a cleaning company. One day, he stopped by to fill up the company car. He was immediately attracted by the friendliness and charm of Marbella. From then on, he made it a point to visit the station almost daily, filling up his cars and trying to strike up a conversation with Marbella. She treated him with the same courtesy and smile she gave to all her other customers. Soon, Juan started giving Marbella gifts such as sweets, toys, and chocolate. He even brought breakfast for her and other female employees. She told William, who she thought of as her father, about Juan's actions. William warned Marbella to be careful since Juan was much older. However, she said she wasn't interested in Juan. For she, a 20-year-old girl, the attention of an older person like Juan seemed funny and even ridiculous. Her colleagues also found the situation funny. Everyone considered Juan to be a friendly and respectable person, not a threat to young girls. Marbella made it clear she wasn't interested in Juan and often turned down his invitations to meet. Juan didn't take these rejections well, and his behavior started to change. Marbella noticed that Juan would often follow her after her shift at the gas station. He seemed to always know her whereabouts and would appear, asking her to go with him. There were times when she suspected he of following her home. She mentioned this strange behavior to her colleagues. On Wednesday, February 5, 2020, Marbella failed to show up for work at the gas station and did not contact anyone to explain her absence. Marbella and her friend Brenda, although not living together, would meet up several times a week. Brenda had a young son whom Marbella adored and visited often. They would talk on the phone daily. Brenda, who worked the night shift, would usually call Marbella every morning after returning home. That Wednesday, Brenda and Marbella didn't talk as usual. Brenda woke up around 9 a.m. to find a message from Marbella saying she had a stomach ache and wouldn't be going to work. Instead, she planned to see a doctor. This message worried Brenda for two reasons: her health and the unusual manner in which the message was written. It was also strange that she didn't call. Brenda tried to reach Marbella but couldn't, so she contacted their mutual friends. However, none of them had any information about Marbella's whereabouts. The group of friends began searching for Marbella in local hospitals and medical centers, but they couldn't find her anywhere. Brenda and one of her friends decided to visit Marbella's house. They knocked on the door and rang the bell, but there was no answer. Normally, Marbella would leave a window slightly open for her friends to come and go. This time, the window was wide open. Brenda climbed in through the window and found the interior of the house looking as if Marbella had just come home from university. Her belongings, including books, clothes, bag, and car keys, were all in their usual places. However, Marbella is missing. Throughout the day, they searched various locations but found nothing. According to Brenda, they went to the police to report Marbella missing. However, because Marbella was an adult, police regulations required waiting 3 days before launching an official search. Despite this, an investigation began right away. Brenda and her friends started making flyers with Marbella's photo. Marbella was described as a young girl with brown eyes, long straight chestnut red hair, dark skin, a slim build, a height of 1.50 meters, and a weight of 45 kilograms. They posted and distributed these flyers throughout the city. At the same time, William used his network of contacts to launch a search campaign for Marbella. Along with Brenda, they even attempted to hack into Marbella's phone to determine her location, but this was unsuccessful. In a later interview, Brenda mentioned that even Juan's behavior became more suspicious. 3 days after Marbella's disappearance, on February 8, the police received a call from a man who reported finding a woman's body in a dump in the Colonia Te Colet area. This location was over 26 miles from Marbella's house in southern Tijuana and was so remote. It took the police a long time to locate this site, but they eventually arrived. Among a pile of garbage, they discovered a large black bag containing the body of a young woman. She was dressed in blue pajamas with images of black puppies and animal print slippers. The body was almost face down, with the legs tied with a yellow cord and the hands tied behind the back with a pink scarf wrapped. The body was taken to the morgue for examination, while investigators collected evidence at the scene. After finding the body, police informed Brenda that the body's characteristics matched the description of Marbella. Brenda and William immediately went to the morgue, but were told they had to wait until the next day to examine the body. Juan unexpectedly appeared and helped them gain access to the morgue. Unfortunately, they determined that the body was that of Marbella. At that time, Juan did not know that Brenda and Marbella's friends had reported him to the police, as they suspected him of stalking Marbella. The police requested permission from Marbella's family to carry out a forensic examination and conduct other investigations to collect evidence. The examination of Marbella's remains took about 5 days. Mourning began on February 13, 2020, and continued until February 14. Juan attended the wake and funeral, he wearing a T-shirt with her image. This made her friends extremely angry. Despite their anger, they remained silent, follow the instructions of the authorities so that he does not become suspicious, as they feared he might escape before sufficient evidence was collected for his arrest. At Marbella's funeral, Jose Ruiz, a close friend of hers, spotted an individual with scratches on his neck. This man behaved strangely, repeatedly approaching the coffin, threatening people with a knife, and offered to carry flowers to the cemetery in his car. Meanwhile, police are still trying their best to investigate Marbella's death. Forensic results revealed that she died from asphyxia due to severe compression of her neck, which blocked her air supply. She also suffered serious blows to the abdomen, causing damage to her internal organs. In front of the University of Baja California, Marbella's classmates held a memorial in her memory. They emphasized that she was a victim of violence by men, a serious problem taking place across Mexico. The investigation into Marbella's killing included interviews with people who knew her. Through the interviews, it was learned that a few days before she was killed, she had spoken to Juan. He said that he was a federal police officer in Baja California and worked as a specialist at the Attorney General's office. However, it was discovered that he had only interned at the Attorney General's office. Additionally, some media outlets reported that he had a criminal record and was imprisoned for offenses related to illegal substances in the state of Sonora. The results of a search of Marbella's car were even more troubling, as experts found a hidden geolocation device. Later, a search of Juan's house uncovered several similar devices and satellite detection receivers. This explains why he always knows where she is. However, the most compelling evidence came from a forensic examination of the body, which revealed fingerprints and semen. DNA analysis confirmed that these matched the genetic sample taken from Juan when he was brought in for questioning. An analysis of Marbella's mobile phone showed that her phone and Juan's were always in the same locations during her disappearance. This shows that he used her phone to send messages to her friends. A few days after the funeral, Juan was charged with the murder of Marbella, and on February 22, 2020, he appeared in court for the first time. During this hearing, it was revealed that after her disappearance, he contacted the state attorney general's office several times to ask about the investigation's progress. He also expressed his wish that the person responsible for Marbella's death would not be punished. The authorities stated that Juan had always been the main suspect in the case due to previous reported incidents of harassment. It was said that he was obsessed with Marbella, even though he had known her for only 5 months. Since then, he had been under police surveillance. According to the investigation, he allegedly entered her house and kidnapped her. The incident occurred between February 5 and 8 in the Sy Kotlef Aliman neighborhood, where Juan lived. There he kept she, exerting physical and sexual violence, which caused injuries to her face, stomach, and genitals, ultimately leading to her death. The conclusion in the case was that Marbella died of lack of oxygen, caused by compression of the neck, which blocked the airway and blood vessels. She also sustained severe bruising to her abdomen, causing damage to internal organs. Juan's DNA matched semen found in Marbella's body, and a considerable amount of tissue was found under her fingernails, indicating a struggle. During the hearing, mobile phone tracking data revealed that Juan and Marbella's phones were together starting from the morning of February 5th. The body was discovered at Marbella's home. Another important clue is that their phones were also together on February 2nd. This was also the day Marbella reported her house and car keys missing. On February 27th, at a hearing in the Superior Court of Tijuana, Judge Daniel Aguilar Patina concluded there is enough evidence to accuse Juan of killing Marbella. The judge highlighted that Juan deliberately misled everyone about Marbella's whereabouts, pretending to be worried in front of her family and at the gas station, while he actually knew what was going on. He was temporarily detained in MIAs, but maintained his innocence regarding. His trial occurred from September 14th to 29th, 2022. Over 2 years after the incident, forensic evidence and testimony from people close to Marbella were presented. It was discovered that on the morning Marbella went missing, a colleague had called her, noting that she had not been to the gas station. She only managed to say she was unwell before the connection was broken. Her friends described her as a wonderful person and identified Juan as a harasser. She never believed she was in danger, so she didn't file an official complaint against Juan, she thinking he would lose interest after her repeated rejections. Other witnesses mentioned that he often pretended to be a law enforcement officer, but he was just an intern at the University of Justice. After reviewing all the evidence and listening to the testimonies, Judge Marta Elvia Luna Vargas declared that Juan committed the horrendous crime, he that took Marbella's life. She then sentenced Juan to 42 years and 6 months in prison for the murder of Marbella Valdez. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Sarah Ludeman. Sarah Ludeman was born on December 7, 1990 in the United States. Her father, Charles, was a taxi driver, and her mother, Gay, was a surgeon. Although they were originally from New York, they moved to Florida in search of a better living environment. During her school years, Sarah faced ridicule from her classmates because of her weight, which had a significant impact on her psychological well-being. To cope with this, she turned to her father for support. From then on, she became very close to her father. She often sat next to him in a taxi, turned on the radio at high volume and sang along to country songs. Charles introduced her to new lessons, games, and concerts. Over time, Sarah became more confident, and during her high school years at Johns Hopkins in St. Petersburg, she made many friends. She graduated with excellent grades, and many teachers recognized her potential, predicting a bright future for her. Sarah was a bright and talented young woman who excelled in her studies and aspired to be a veterinarian. Her parents, Charles and Gay, were proud of her career choice as it reflected her deep kindness and compassion. While many of her friends were starting to date, Sarah found herself attracted only to unattainable figures, like famous musicians and athletes. By the age of 16, Sarah was content living her own life without the desire for romantic relationships. Very close to her, although they never met, was another girl her age named Rachel Wade. Rachel was born on February 27, 1990. Her family was a typical American middle-class family. Her mother worked as a teacher's assistant at an elementary school, and her father was a truck driver. Rachel was a quiet child who loved to play and have fun. Everything changed for Rachel when she entered her teenage years. At 15, she became withdrawn, moody, and frequently argued with her parents, particularly her mother. Misunderstandings arose for various reasons, such as Rachel's refusal to help with household chores or disagreements about her friends. When she was unhappy with something, she would run away. At first, her parents, Barry and Janet, searched for her on their own, but when Rachel began to disappear more frequently, they felt compelled to call in the police. They soon realized that Rachel's main problem was her desire to impress boys. She became obsessed with them, and when a boy showed interest in her, she would focus on him and ignore everything else. Rachel fell into a cycle of moving from one relationship to another. By the time she turned 17, her parents had lost all patience. They were exhausted from searching for her and trying to convince her to come home. Rachel became increasingly difficult to handle, even resorting to violence against her parents. During her last attempt to leave, she was open about her plans. She told Barry and Janet that she intended to move in with a guy named Javier Loboy. At that point, she was just a month away from her 17th birthday. Rachel's relationship with Javier ended abruptly. As expected, the police were called to their apartment several times due to arguments. When they broke up, Rachel wasn't too upset. She quickly found comfort with another friend of Javier's, Joshua Camacho. Joshua, with sharp facial features, curly black hair, and golden skin that captivated her. He was physically strong and had a way with words. After high school, he didn't pursue further education and instead took on odd jobs. He enjoyed taking selfies, posing with a gun, or showing off a tattoo. Joshua often relied on the girls for support and rarely accomplished anything on his own. Erin Slow Tower, Joshua's ex-lover, became pregnant and gave birth to a child. Joshua took no responsibility for his daughter and did not pay any child support. Instead, he continued to live a carefree life in his parents' house, with no plans for the future. Joshua had a knack for attracting new girls. However, he was very controlling and even argued with his girlfriend. Joshua dropped out of school and worked as a waiter, which helped him pay for his apartment. From the beginning, he tried to assert his dominance over Rachel, controlling her every move. Later, they broke up several times, but each breakup only made Rachel love him more, and she was always the first to come back. One day, Sarah Ludeman visited the restaurant where Joshua worked, and her life changed forever. She fell in love with him at first sight. Joshua made Sarah feel extremely special. Soon, Sarah mustered up the courage and told her parents about her feelings. However, Charles and Gay doubted the sincerity of Joshua, who clearly loved no one but himself and only met gullible and naive girls who could easily believe his charming words. Her parents decided to be patient, hoping that the relationship would eventually end on its own. However, this did not happen. The teenage love story continued to develop. It got to the point where Sarah transferred to another school to be closer to Joshua. Although her parents disapproved of this decision, they held on to the hope that their daughter would eventually realize the truth and that things would return to normal. During the first 6 months of their relationship, Joshua and Sarah frequently argued in public, often so violently that the police were called. One day, Sarah got into a fight with Erin, the mother of Joshua's daughter. During the argument, Joshua became angry and punched Sarah in the face, but she did not press charges. It's unclear how he managed to manipulate all 3 women, but it seems the 3 girls' different schedules made it easier for Joshua to deceive. Sarah had to be home by 11 p.m. at the request of her parents, while Erin worked 2 jobs and was only free at night. Despite her jealousy and sometimes finding Joshua with other women, Erin always returned to him. Rachel, on the other hand, had a busy job but had her own apartment, where Joshua would sometimes stay. When Sarah and Rachel discover each other, instead of facing Joshua together, they focus on competing for his affection. Their rivalry takes place primarily online through text messages and social media. Both girls are certain that they will win Joshua's heart, believing that he will eventually choose one of them. This leads to incidents such as slashed tires, broken mirrors, and street arguments. Their behavior worries their parents, who feel helpless and unsure of how to intervene. Conflict between Sarah and Rachel escalated from simple online arguments and minor issues to serious threats of violence. After Joshua and Sarah's trip to New York, Sarah posted photos of them together on MySpace, which greatly angered Rachel. On August 29, 2008, Rachel left an angry voice message for Sarah, threatening her life. In her message, Rachel not only expressed her anger, but also bragged about how financially independent and attractive she was. Sarah later saved these messages, possibly out of fear for her safety. Rachel had been texting Sarah all morning, bragging about her relationship with Joshua. Sarah's best friend Ashley had been encouraging her to get over Joshua for the past few months, reminding her that she deserved better, but Sarah never took her advice. During lunch, while the other students were in the cafeteria, Sarah cried in Ashley's arms. Ashley tried to cheer her up by suggesting that they go to the mall or the movies after school, but Sarah refused, insisting that she needed to talk to Joshua. Her situation worsened when she went to Rachel's MySpace page and saw a post in which Rachel expressed her love for Joshua. Although Rachel did not mention him by name, Sarah immediately realized who she was referring to. Frustrated, Sarah sent Joshua several text messages but received no response. She then accused him of ignoring her. Joshua eventually responded but tried to change the subject away from Rachel. After a few messages, Sarah rushed to see him. Meanwhile, Rachel, who had the day off from work, offered to spend time with Joshua, but he refused, saying that he needed to take care of his sister's children. Not believing his excuses, Rachel decides to go to his sister Janet's house to confirm if Joshua is lying. Before leaving, she puts a knife in her pocket. When she arrives, Rachel finds Sarah, Joshua, Janet, and another girl, Gilly, there. Rachel became upset when she saw Sarah's car parked near the house. The girls noticed Rachel passing by the house several times. Rachel then texted Joshua, asking why he was with other women. He responded by telling her to go home, saying that he didn't like her anymore. However, he only said this to reassure Sarah, as he was actually planning on seeing Rachel later. It was almost 11 o'clock, and Sarah knew she needed to go home, but she couldn't bring herself to leave, because Rachel had come downstairs and texted her, wanting to talk. Joshua and Sarah decided it was best to stay in the house and wait for Rachel to leave. Sarah texted her parents to let them know she would be home late and came up with an excuse to avoid explaining Rachel's obsessive behavior. After midnight, Sarah prepared to go home because Rachel was no longer outside. Meanwhile, Janet and Gilly had asked for a ride to McDonald's, and Sarah felt safer going with them. Rachel went to visit her ex-boyfriend Javier. Meanwhile, Ashley, a friend of Sarah's, learned of Rachel's location and quickly informed Sarah. Without hesitation, Sarah, Janet, and Gilly went to where Rachel was. At that moment, Rachel began sending threatening messages, claiming that she would kill both Sarah and Joshua. She was standing on the street when Sarah's car slowed down nearby. Sarah, Janet, and Gilly got out of the car and ran towards Rachel. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Rachel pulled a knife from her pocket and attacked Sarah, stabbing her twice in the chest. Sarah collapsed, bleeding from a severe wound. Despite her condition, she managed to contact Joshua and explain what had happened. Joshua quickly rushed to Sarah's house to inform her parents. When Charles heard about the tragedy, he rushed to the scene. Meanwhile, Rachel's ex-lover Javier was on the phone with an emergency worker and tried to tear his shirt to stop Sarah's bleeding. Rachel went to a bench, sat down, and threw the knife away. Sarah was taken to the hospital. An hour later, at approximately 3 a.m. on April 15, 2009, Sarah died. The investigation was quick. Joshua and several witnesses testified that Rachel attacked Sarah with a knife. When questioned about why she brought a weapon, Rachel claimed it was for self-defense. At that time, she was unaware of the severity of the wounds she had inflicted on Sarah. The officers asked if Sarah was armed, and Rachel answered no. She maintained that she had not meant to harm Sarah and was actually trying to escape from her. After a lengthy interrogation, the police informed Rachel that Sarah had died from her injuries. This news caused Rachel to faint. Police used witness testimonies to piece together what happened. Consequently, Rachel was officially charged with second-degree murder and taken to the county jail with a bond set at $500,000. Despite this serious situation, Rachel did not fully grasp the gravity of her circumstances. This was evident in her phone conversations with friends and family, where she frequently discussed her plans for life after her release, firmly believing that the jury would support her. The trial started on July 20, 2010. The prosecution argued that the intense and hostile dynamics within the love triangle were the motive for Sarah's murder. They highlighted that Rachel had been threatening Sarah on social media prior to the crime, claiming that Rachel's attack was so brutal that the knife blade was bent during the assault. The defense pointed out that Sarah was physically larger than Rachel, emphasizing that Rachel acted in self-defense in a dangerous situation where there were multiple girls present. Witnesses from that night, Janet, Gilly, gave their accounts. Janet and Gilly confirmed that they heard Rachel threaten to kill both Sarah and Joshua. Prosecutors presented a recording of the 911 call from that night. In addition, recordings from 2008 and text messages saved by Sarah were introduced into evidence and played a key role in determining the outcome of the case. The jury, which reached its verdict in just 2 hours, found 20-year-old Rachel Wade guilty of second-degree murder. During her trial, she received a 27-year prison sentence, with the possibility of parole after 20 years for good behavior. Rachel was then sent to a women's correctional facility to serve her sentence. Joshua, who was in Florida, left the state. Some believe he went to New York to visit relatives and avoid media scrutiny, while others think he returned to Florida to reconcile with Aaron. In 2011, Rachel, who was in prison, agreed to an interview. She expressed remorse for the events that occurred and wished she could go back in time and make different choices. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Pamela Buckbinder. Jacob Nolan was born in 1991 into a wealthy family in Miami, Florida. As the third child in the family, he received a lot of love from his parents. They realized that he was different from his peers. However, at the age of 5, Jacob was diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. When Jacob turned 15, his family noticed that he was experiencing significant mood swings. Despite this, he was doing well in school. He created an educational smartphone app and won a competition in Miami. However, a month later, Jacob couldn't get out of bed, had no motivation to do anything, even stand up. They finally brought him to a doctor who diagnosed him with depression and anxiety. At 17, Jacob expressed that he no longer wanted to live. His parents noticed his unstable behavior and mental state, prompting them to take him to a hospital where he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. This serious mental illness involves extreme mood swings, ranging from depression to emotional outbursts. Those affected feel trapped in their own thoughts. After finishing high school, Jacob enrolled in college while continuing his treatment. Throughout this time, he saw various psychiatrists who prescribed increasingly stronger medications. From the ages of 17 to 20, Jacob underwent numerous treatment courses, took 5 to 6 pills daily, and tried around 30 different medications, yet none seemed to help. By 2012, at 21 years old, Jacob was still deteriorating. His parents were deeply concerned and unsure of what steps to take next. Then, one day, a relative from New York, Pamela Buckbinder, called with an offer of help. Jacob's parents were relieved, thinking they had gotten help. However, they had no idea of the challenges that were about to come to their family. Pamela, a 43-year-old psychotherapist, lives in Chelsea, Manhattan, with her 4-year-old son, Calder. She and Jacob Nolan are cousins with a 22-year age gap. Jacob was the godfather of her son. In 2012, Pamela offered to help Jacob by inviting him to move from Florida to her apartment. While living with her, she provided him with therapy sessions and prescribed medication. In exchange for her help, Jacob took responsibility for Calder's care. Jacob trusted her completely. In one photo, Jacob is seen lying in bed with Pamela, laughing, which shows he feels comfortable and at home with her. However, it's important to note that this relationship is not just familial. Pamela is also Jacob's psychotherapist. Jacob cared deeply for Calder and treated him like a son. He wanted to set a positive example for his godson of what a real man should be like. This approach seemed to work, as Jacob, who had struggled with mental illness for years, seemed to be stabilizing, joking frequently and always smiling. Unfortunately, this happiness did not last long. Over time, Pamela began to frequently express her frustrations with her ex-partner, Michael Weiss, Calder's father. Pamela ended her relationship with Michael shortly after the birth of her son. Michael Weiss, 38, is a psychotherapist. On the surface, he and Pamela appear to be a happy, loving couple. However, beneath the perfect exterior, their relationship is in trouble. Both Michael and Pamela have reported domestic violence to the police. Pamela once attacked Michael with a piece of broken glass. Michael received medical treatment, stitched up the wound, and later that day, he reported the incident to the police. As a result, Pamela was arrested and charged with assault. However, she was soon forgiven by Michael and the couple reconciled, but a few months later, Pamela went to the police again, claiming that Michael had threatened her and wanted to kill her. She later retracted that statement. Although they were never officially married, Michael and Pamela's relationship lasted about 4 years. After they had a son in 2008, Pamela finally ended the relationship. Their tumultuous relationship ended. But a new conflict arose. The custody battle for their son, Calder. Every day, Pamela tells Jacob about Michael in insulting words. She complained that Michael refused to pay child support and even accused him of doing bad things to their son, Calder, during his visits. On the morning of November 12, 2012, Jacob was awakened by Pamela's gentle touch. She climbed into his bed, caressed his back, and whispered sweet nothings in his ear. She told him that Jacob was her savior. He was the best person in the world because no one understood her like he did. However, her affectionate mood quickly changed. She took a black sports bag from her closet and stuffed it with a long-handled hammer and a kitchen knife. Overwhelmed with emotion, she began to cry and told Jacob that today was the day he needed to face Michael. A diagram showing the entrance to the multi-story office building where Michael is seeing patients is written on a piece of paper. Jacob stands up, grabs his bag, stuffs the diagram into his pocket, and leaves. Before leaving, he washes his face and declares, "Today is the day our lives will change for the better because Michael will be eliminated." Jacob arrived at the right high-rise in Manhattan. He circled the building, observing it from different angles. Entering through the service entrance, he checked in on the first floor, provided his real name, and mentioned he was going to the tutoring center. He was allowed inside. Jacob took the elevator to the 12th floor and made his way to Michael's office. He heard a patient inside and decided to wait in the hallway for the appointment to finish. Soon, the patient would exit, leaving Michael alone. While waiting, Jacob felt increasingly anxious. Doubts flooded his mind, making him question whether he was making the right decisions. At one point, he thought about abandoning everything and running home. However, the idea of returning to Pamela without completing her request and disappointing her was stronger than his fear. Jacob realized he had no choice but to continue. After the patient left, Jacob entered the office and informed Michael that Pamela had asked him to collect financial documents for the Calders kindergarten. As Michael searched for the documents, Jacob asked to use the restroom. In the restroom, Jacob took out a knife and hid it in his pocket, then retrieved a large hammer. He exited the bathroom and approached Michael, swinging the hammer at him. Thankfully, Michael reacted quickly, ducking just in time to avoid a serious injury, though the hammer struck his shoulder. Jacob then pulled out the knife, and a struggle ensued. Michael, being physically larger, quickly fought back. The people around heard Michael's cry for help. They mistakenly thought that the doctor was being attacked by an unstable mental patient. They quickly called 911 to report the incident. Before the police arrived, Jacob and Michael, feeling exhausted, sat down in the hallway. Jacob took out his phone and took a selfie, which he sent to Pamela along with a question about what he should do next. But he never received a reply. The situation made him feel very strange. The police and ambulance arrived shortly after. The injured men were rushed to the hospital for treatment. Fortunately, none of them had life-threatening injuries. Michael was treated and sent home the same day. Jacob's injuries were more serious and the doctors noted that he was unstable. Jacob was arrested in the hospital while he was receiving treatment. He sent a detailed message to Pamela about what had happened to him and Michael. Although she initially ignored his message, she eventually asked which hospital he was in. When Pamela arrived, she was not allowed to see Jacob, who was already handcuffed to the bed. Jacob spent 4 days in the hospital before being taken to a jail cell after his discharge. He was released on bail of $200,000 while awaiting trial. Jacob was permitted to fly from New York to his parents' home in Florida. Several weeks after the incident, Michael filed a lawsuit against Pamela, accusing her of conspiring to kill him. Michael argued that Pamela was dangerous and insisted that their son should live with him. He presented surveillance footage from a hardware store showing that the day before the attack, Pamela and Jacob had purchased a hammer together, and Pamela had paid in cash. Pamela denied any involvement, saying that she had only asked Jacob to retrieve some financial documents from Michael, but had not asked Jacob to attack. Although she admitted to giving Jacob a knife, she explained that it was to protect her son Calder, since Calder's daycare was on the first floor of the building where Michael worked. Shortly thereafter, the judge transferred custody of Calder to Michael Weiss, granting him full custody and banning Pamela from contacting her son for 5 years. A few months after the incident, Jacob accused Pamela of orchestrating the attack on Michael. He claimed that Pamela meticulously planned the attack, and that she had instructed Jacob to approach Michael and hit him with a hammer. Jacob previously said that Pamela had been psychologically manipulating him. Pamela repeatedly told him that Michael was harming her son, but there was no evidence to support her claim. No one ever witnessed Michael harming Calder or saying anything negative to his son. In fact, relatives testified that Michael cared deeply for his son. Pamela was someone Jacob trusted completely and considered very close. Meanwhile, Jacob's parents were in despair. They fully supported their son and claimed that Pamela had brainwashed him using psychological techniques from her practice. In March 2016, Jacob Nolan's trial began. He claimed that Pamela had forced him to attack Michael Weiss. Prosecutors described Jacob as a spoiled child from a wealthy family, noting that he provided 3 inconsistent accounts of the event and appeared confused. When the police first arrived at Michael's office, Jacob pointed at Michael and accused him of attacking Jacob with a knife. However, during questioning, Jacob claimed that he had never used a hammer in Michael's office. He explained that he had brought the hammer for self-defense because he was afraid of Michael. In his third statement, Jacob said that Michael had attacked him first. Prosecutors presented a key piece of evidence regarding the motive behind the attack on Michael. Just before the attack, Michael had purchased a $1.5 million life insurance policy, naming his son Calder as the beneficiary. However, 3 days before the attack, on November 9, 2012, Michael had agreed to add Pamela as a co-beneficiary and allow her to manage Calder's money. Jacob claimed that this was the first time he had learned about the insurance policy and claimed that Pamela had never shared her financial affairs with him. During the trial, it was revealed that Jacob had purchased plastic zip ties from a hardware store in addition to the hammer found with Pamela. Jacob confirmed this and made a shocking admission. Pamela had asked him not only to kill Michael but also to ensure he suffered before dying. She described brutal acts that Jacob was supposed to carry out. Jacob refused to inflict such extreme cruelty. But he agreed to kill Michael. Jacob mentioned that Pamela initially wanted to create a homemade weapon using an air pistol, but when they got to the hardware store, they decided it would be easier and more effective to use a hammer instead. Jacob's attorney focused on proving that Jacob was insane. However, proving that he was insane is quite difficult. Currently, there is no test that can reveal a person's thoughts and feelings at the time of the crime. Evaluations are usually based on interviews, police reports, medical records, and sometimes social media messages. Often, 2 different psychiatrists can give conflicting opinions, which can confuse judges and juries. Although mental illness can affect emotions, thoughts, and behavior, throughout the trial, Jacob clearly understood his actions and admitted that they were wrong and bad. He did not appear insane in court. He was handsome, articulate, well-dressed, and answered questions clearly. Pamela was not called to testify at the trial by either the prosecution or the defense. Jacob Nolan, who had a mental disorder, faced skepticism regarding his claim that Pamela was the one who initiated the attack. Before the trial, Jacob's lawyers hired detectives to locate Pamela, but they were unable to find her, and her apartment was empty. In March 2016, after a 2-week trial, 24-year-old Jacob Nolan was convicted of attempted murder and second-degree assault, receiving a sentence of 9.5 years in prison. Jacob was very upset about his sentence, stating, "It's unfair. I'm not a danger to society." His parents regretted their decision to send him to live with their Pamela, believing it was their biggest mistake. On October 19, 2017, nearly 5 years after Michael's attack, police located Pamela in Sullivan, New York. The Manhattan District Attorney charged her with conspiracy to murder Michael Weiss. At the time of Pamela's arrest, police found her passport and Calder's birth certificate. Pamela was arrested and maintained her innocence. She hired 2 of New York's top attorneys, who claimed that the video showing her doing laundry and the video of her buying the hammer had been edited. They claimed that Pamela was a highly educated psychotherapist and would never have considered organizing a murder. In the 5 years after Jacob's attack, Pamela lived a normal life. She worked and rented an apartment. She did not attempt to go into hiding or flee the country, but she avoided reporters and did not comment on Jacob's crimes. Pamela was detained before her trial at the notorious Rikers Island prison in New York, where she spent 5 years due to legal issues. On September 7, 2022, during a pre-trial hearing, Pamela made a statement agreeing to plead guilty in return for a lighter sentence. However, a month later, she decided to withdraw her plea. Pamela's trial took place. The jury found Pamela Buchbinder guilty and she was sentenced to 11 years in prison. After the verdict was read, she looked sadly at her relative, who blew her kisses. Jacob and Pamela are currently serving their sentences in separate correctional facilities in New York. Jacob is scheduled to be released in 2024, while Pamela will be released in 2027. Jacob maintains regular phone contact with his parents. He has expressed remorse for his actions and reflects on them every night. He even wishes to meet Michael Weiss in person to apologize and seek forgiveness. When Pamela is released, her son, Calder, will be 19. He is currently being raised by his biological father, Michael, who still works in Manhattan.